Chapter 934. Suddenly receiving the loyalty of so many powerhouses in the pugilistic world, Xiang Chong almost lost his composure. This was a genuine true fire spirit refinement state powerhouse and a real pellet state grandmaster, and each of them had an extraordinary background. At this time, Lin Fengyu, who had been following behind Xiang Chong, said, "Your Royal Highness, although it is a good thing that so many people have joined us, isn't it a bit suspicious that so many people came all at once?" Lin Fengyu was targeting Daoist Wuyang not because he saw something wrong with Daoist Wuyang, but purely because he wanted to fight for favor. Daoist Wuyang snorted coldly, "Suspicious? What does a waste like you know? Are you doubting my friendship with them? We are all in the same boat, and I have friendship with many powerhouses in the pugilistic world. Now that your Royal Highness is tolerant, I have found them all and let them have a place to stay. At the same time, I can also increase your Royal Highness' strength. What's suspicious about that? With your ant-like cultivation, you dare to talk nonsense here. Are you looking for death?" As soon as his voice fell, an evil chill suddenly surged around Daoist Wuyang, causing Lin Fengyu to shiver. Daoist Wuyang was a martial arts grandmaster of the real pellet state, and he was one of the stronger ones. Lin Fengyu, a low-level martial artist who had only reached the innate realm, couldn't even resist the opponent's momentum. But at this time, Li Jiaodi saw someone scolding her man. She immediately frowned and waved her hand, suppressing Daoist Wuyang with a powerful aura. "Looking for death? I want to see who is the one looking for death. Daoist Wuyang, when you were chased by the hidden demon lineage in Taoism like a stray dog, why didn't you show off your power to them?" Seeing his two right-hand men quarreling, Xiang Chong hurriedly began to mediate. That's right, Xiang Chong had now regarded Daoist Wuyang as his right-hand man, even more so than Lin Fengyu. Although Lin Fengyu was the first to join him, his strength and ability were limited. His only advantage was Li Jiaodi, so Xiang Chong wasn't worried that he would betray him. Furthermore, Daoist Wuyang had already worked for his father for so many years. His strength and influence were both guaranteed. Now that he had even helped him recruit so many experts, he was even more important to him. Of course, Xiang Chong was not completely stimulated by such a good thing and lost his mind. Although Lin Fengyu's words were directed at Daoist Wuyang, his suspicions were reasonable. Therefore, Xiang Chong sent someone to Wind's Sweeping Tower to verify the identities of these people. The reputation of Wind's Sweeping Tower had already formed a subconscious in the entire Jianghu. Whenever there was a need to check this kind of information, they would definitely go to Wind's Sweeping Tower. Xiang Chong heaved a sigh of relief when he received the report from Wind's Sweeping Tower and found that it was indeed similar to what Daoist Wuyang had said. At the same time, he valued Daoist Wuyang even more. His subordinates could be said to be full of talents, but there weren't many who could really get things done. Although Lin Fengyu could be considered a loyal person, his insight and knowledge were limited. Even with Li Jiaodi's support, he couldn't achieve much. As for that cheap master of Kong Dongming, he had a reputation and strength, but for the time being, he could only be used to scare people. He was similarly useless. As such, Xiang Chong also discovered that the truly capable and powerful person under him was Daoist Wuyang. If he didn't value him, who else could he value? However, at this moment, Xiang Chong did not know that Daoist Wuyang, whom he valued, was in a secret stronghold of subduing Martial Hall, reporting to Chu Xiu all the details of his subordinates. Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said lightly, "If that's the case, does Xiang Chong value you very much?" Daoist Wuyang said mockingly, "There isn't a single useful person under Xiang Chong's command. If he doesn't value me, who else could he value?" Actually, Daoist Wuyang had the chance to betray Xiang Chong. He wasn't Chu Xiu's subordinate. They were just cooperating. If he told Xiang Chong about Chu Xiu's plan to send him undercover, he would definitely be seen as a benefactor by Xiang Chong. However, Daoist Wuyang didn't choose to do so because he was a little afraid of Chu Xiu. This was not because he was afraid of being beaten by Chu Xiu, but because he realized that Chu Xiu had too many trump cards. In this Jianghu, there was probably no one who could truly see how many trump cards Chu Xiu had. This time, Chu Xiu had brought out 2 real fire spirit refinement state and 6 real pellet state martial artists. This strength was enough to become a first-class sect in the outside world. However, if these people didn't have fake identities, Daoist Wuyang wouldn't even recognize a single one of them. This was a little terrifying. Although Daoist Wuyang always felt that these people were a little strange, their strength was there for all to see. God knew if Chu Xiu had other trump cards. Therefore, the thought of betrayal only appeared in Daoist Wuyang's mind for a moment before it was completely thrown to the bottom of the valley. Anyway, it seemed that Chu Xiu had a higher chance of winning, at least in his opinion. Official Chu, right now, I'm enough for Xiangchong to pay attention to me. The people you sent have also become the core force that Xiangchong relies on. What should I do next? Chu Xiu sent such a strong force to Xiangchong. Daoist Wuyang didn't believe that Chu Xiu was just increasing Xiangchong's strength and stabilizing his position. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "It's very simple. Next, you just need to encourage Xiangchong to gather the power in his hands." Power? What kind of power? Chu Xiu squinted his eyes and said, "Of course it's the power that he hasn't controlled before, such as the military, the 5 armies of the state, or the royal service hall, etc. You just need to encourage Xiangchong to let him place the people I send into these departments, then suppress the dissidents and fight for power." Do I still need to teach this kind of thing? Daoist Wuyang raised his eyebrows and subconsciously felt a chill in his heart. Chu Xiu's move seemed to be to increase Xiangchong's power, but it was actually very insidious. It was obviously to ruin Xiangchong's reputation. Xiangchong was not the emperor yet. Even if he did become the emperor of the Northern Yan, such wanton plundering of the power of the various departments of the Northern Yan would arouse disgust and even enmity. For example, the 5 armies of the state were the private property of the big shots in the military. All the experts in the 5 armies were almost all promoted from the bottom up. The only exception among the 5 armies was Xiang Wu. He was a spy that Xiang Long had planted in the military. But Xiang Wu was able to sit firmly in the position of the Westling Army's general because of his own strength. Secondly, although he was a member of the Northern Yan royal family, he actually grew up in the Jianghu. Even though he was promoted by Xiang Long, Xiang Wu and the Northern Yan royal family were actually not on good terms, so the 5 armies of the state did not ostracize him too much. But now, Chu Xiu wanted Xiangchong to place people in their departments to fight for power. This would probably offend the military. So Daoist Wuyang said hesitantly, "Would Xiangchong dig his own grave like this?" "Lord Chu, forgive me for speaking bluntly, but I've been by Xiangchong's side for a period of time. Although this person's temperament and ability aren't very high, he's not too stupid either. He should know the consequences of such a matter." Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Of course he knows, but he will still do it. You should know what Xiangchong was like in the early years. None of those big shots in the military chose to side with him or help him. Instead, they all went to Xiang Li's side. Having grown up in such an environment, Xiangchong's attitude towards those people is not very good. Even if they all go to his side now, he still won't change his mind. As long as you bring it up at the right time, he won't refuse." Chu Xiu had a good eye for people, but when he first looked at Xiangchong, he made some mistakes. Later on, he carefully studied Xiangchong's mentality and more or less understood why the other had changed so much. The desire for power could distort a person's heart. Xiangchong was clearly such a person. From feeling inferior to having nothing, to suddenly gaining everything, such a sudden change and distortion in mentality was something that few could withstand. And because of this, Xiangchong had not yet gotten used to his identity. For a qualified monarch, the fickleness of human emotions was very normal. Although there were such things as burning stoves for cold stoves, when you were at your lowest point, others would not bet all their treasures on you. If such a thing happened to a qualified monarch, he would definitely laugh it off. Others were loyal to power, and if he had power, he would naturally be able to obtain the loyalty of others. Such a thing was very normal. But Xiangchong still could not let go of the neglect and supercilious looks he had received in the past. Why would he worry about offending others? Daoist Wuyang was still somewhat hesitant towards Chu Xiu's analysis. However, since he was now standing on Chu Xiu's side, being ambivalent was a great taboo. Therefore, he could only follow Chu Xiu's words and find an opportunity to incite Xiang Chong to make a move. Several days later, after a banquet, Xiang Chong suddenly sought out Daoist Wuyang alone and asked, "Daoist, I am no longer considered weak, but for some reason, I still feel that I'm lacking something. Can you tell what I'm lacking?" Daoist Wuyang sneered in his heart. "What you lack now is cunning. Xiang Long has already arranged everything. All you need to do is to obediently wait for Xiang Long's death and you'll be able to inherit the throne. Now, you're still stirring up trouble. If this isn't foolishness, then what is?" However, Xiang Chang's question gave Daoist Wuyang a chance. He stroked his long beard and pondered for a moment. "Your Highness currently has both status and strength. Logically speaking, you don't lack anything. However, there is only one thing you lack, and there is no way to make it up for now. Therefore, it's best not to say it." Xiang Chong hurriedly said, "Daoist, why are you still keeping me in suspense? What exactly do I lack? Tell me first, then I'll know if it can be made up for." Daoist Wuyang's face turned solemn as he said resolutely, "Power. Your Highness, what you lack now is power." Chapter 935. Xiang Chong was taken aback when he heard Daoist Wuyang say that what he lacked the most was power. He laughed and said, "You must be joking, Daoist. What I lack now is power. Internally, I have you, the experts of the pugilistic world, helping me, and externally, I have the identity of Crown Prince. Countless nobles from the military have come to me. Are these not power?" Daoist Wuyang said coolly, "You are half right, Your Highness. Although we are your men, we are, after all, the ruffians of the pugilistic world. Our words carry limited weight in the Northern Yen Imperial Court. As for those from the military or the Imperial Sinecure Hall, although they are nominally loyal to Your Highness, if you go to the 5 great armies and see if you can mobilize the lowest ranking officer, you can't even mobilize the lowest ranking officer. Your Highness, you call this power? Your power is not power, it is just the face that those people are giving you." The smile on Xiang Chang's face gradually disappeared as he listened to Daoist Wuyang's words. That's right, this power did not belong to him. Or, it should be said that it had never belonged to him. Although those people were on his side in name, once he gave any orders, he would still need their agreement before he could command them. They were unlike Daoist Wuyang and the others who were on his side. If he told them to go east, they would definitely not dare to go west. Xiang Chong said fiercely, "Daoist Wuyang, what do you think I should do to get the power?" Daoist Wuyang shook his head and said, "Getting it is easy. Your Highness, you have such a strong force under your command. Just give an order and insert someone into the 5 great armies or the Imperial Sinecure Hall as a spy. You might not be able to get all the power, but at least a part of it is not a problem. But, I don't suggest Your Highness to do that, as it will offend the experts from the military or the Imperial Sinecure Hall. The loss outweighs the gain." It would have been better if Daoist Wuyang did not advise him, but his advice only made Xiang Chong even angrier. "I am the Crown Prince of Great Yen. In the future, the entire Great Yen will belong to me. Now, I'm not trying to usurp their positions, I'm just trying to insert some people into their ranks. Yet, they are so unwilling. Does the Great Yen belong to us, Xiang clan, or them?" Daoist Wuyang sneered in his mind. Of course, the Northern Yen belongs to Xiang clan, at least for now. But if there's no one else, do you think that the Xiang family alone can support the entire Northern Yen? Unfortunately, Xiang Chong had not thought of this point. The more Taoist Wuyang persuaded him, the more determined Xiang Chong became. He placed all the merchant city warriors sent by Chu Xiu into the 5 armies of the state and the Imperial Consecrator Hall. The merchant city martial artists that Chu Xiu had brought with him were not idiots. In fact, martial artists who grew up in a place like Green City had spent their lives fighting. Although they had not come into contact with the intrigues of the outside world, it did not mean that they did not know these things. However, Chu Xiu had already given them instructions. There was no need for them to have any scruples, and there was no need for them to care about the power struggle. They could just go as far as they could. They had to put on an appearance of insatiable greed and crazily fight for power. The more they offended these people, the better. Most things were difficult to do well, but it was very easy to do bad things. In less than half a month, the merchant city martial artists had already made the 5 armies of the state and the imperial consecrator hall full of complaints. Of the 2 true fire spirit refinement state martial artists, one was thrown into the imperial consecrator hall by Xiang Chong, and the other was placed in the Dongshan army in the northern palace. As for the 6 real pellet state martial artists, there was one from the imperial consecrator hall, and one from each of the 5 armies of the state. The more they went overboard, in Xiang Chong's view, the more they did their best for him, and the more satisfied he was. In the cool breeze of Yanjing City, Chu Xiu sat in the corner by the window and drank tea, listening to Mei Qinglian's report on the various situations in Yanjing City during this time. Of course, it was mainly about Xiang Chong. Although the Cool Breeze Inn was a restaurant, its wine was not the most famous. Instead, it was a variety of dishes that were very good, especially the vegetarian dishes. It was said that the chef used to be a cook in the kitchen of the Great Light Temple. Of course, Chu Xiu had never seen the monks of the Great Light Temple in this place. Thinking about it, it was normal. Those monks had been eating vegetarian in the Great Light Temple for a lifetime. It was sad that they still had to eat this when they finally came out. Next to Chu Xiu, Tang Ye ordered a lot of things and ate there. He didn't even listen carefully to the conversation between Mei Qinglian and Chu Xiu. The people who played tricks had dirty hearts. Official Chu's heart was probably dirty. Xiang Chong, that kid, would definitely vomit blood because of the scheme. There was nothing good to listen to. If he listened too much, it would affect his appetite. After listening to Mei Qinglian, Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said, "Xiang Chong actually didn't have the slightest doubt? It seems that I overestimated him this time." Mei Qinglian sneered and said, "That kid was just a fallen prince." Although he was doted on by Xiang Long, his status was different. Xiang Long didn't have time to teach him those tricks. How good can he be? Look at the people around him. They are all like Lin Fengyu. They can't do anything right. Even Li Jiaoti's mind is not clear. The only person who can be considered to have some tricks is the spy you sent. It would be strange if he could see that something was wrong. Chu Xiu raised his teacup and shook his head. He said, "What spy? That sounds bad. It's called undercover." Tang Ye raised his head from the pile of food and said, "It's the same meaning." Before Chu Xiu could reply, Xiang Wu came up from downstairs. Chu Xiu sat on the top floor of the Cool Breeze gang. With his fierce reputation, only someone like Xiang Wu would dare to let up here. Seeing Chu Xiu here, Xiang Wu casually greeted him. "So you are here, Brother Chu. No wonder it's so quiet here. There are benefits to having a good reputation. You don't even need to clear the place for a meal." As he spoke, Xiang Wu naturally sat at Chu Xiu's table. He shouted downstairs, "Manager, add a plate of roasted bananas." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Famous? I'm afraid it's a bad reputation. Anyway, it's not a good one." Xiang Wu ate a mouthful of food and said fiercely, "What's wrong with a bad reputation? If I had a good reputation, I wouldn't be trampled on by others." Chu Xiu thought of something and said calmly, "Who dares to trample on Marquis Xiang's neck?" Xiang Wu said gloomily, "Don't keep talking about how to trample on others when you are eating. It affects my appetite." Although Xiang Wu said so, when the manager sent a plate of roasted bananas, he immediately stuffed one into his mouth. After swallowing it, he snorted coldly, "It's all because of Xiang Chong. Being a crown prince, he thinks he is invincible. He even dares to plant a spy in my West Hill army. If it weren't for His Majesty's face, would have killed that spy long ago. A weak real pellet state martial artist dares to come to my territory to share power? Chu Xiu touched his chin. I seem to want to tell those martial artists in the merchant city that while fighting for power, it's best to avoid provoking Xiang Wu and the other generals of the 5 armies. These guys are not to be trifled with. For example, Xiang Wu's peak combat power is already qualified to challenge the existence of real fire spirit refinement realm, but the martial artists from the merchant city are weaker than the martial artists of the same rank. If Xiang Wu is really angry and makes a move, they may not even be able to resist 3 moves. Chu Xiu handed a cup of tea to Xiang Wu and said, I also heard about this matter. A new official has to make 3 moves, not to mention the crown prince. Of course, he wants to make some achievements. Xiang Wu sneered and said, if you want to make achievements, you have to encroach on our interests. This group of people from the Xiang family royal family is really not good. They only know how to fight for power. Chu Xiu's expression was a little strange. Is this master muddled from anger? He seems to have forgotten that he is also a member of the Xiang family. After Xiang Wu finished scolding, he reacted and stuffed another banana into his mouth gloomily. Chu Xiu asked, then what are you going to do now, Master Ho? Xiang Wu said gloomily, what else can I do? Nothing. Xiang Chong has just been appointed as the crown prince. His Majesty is already like this, and it's impossible to appoint a second one. If I find trouble with him, it is to find trouble with His Majesty. I can only endure it for now. A strange look appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes. He said, then General Beigong and the Imperial Family's Hall of Masters can both endure it? Xiang Wu said with a chuckle, don't be fooled by General Beigong's usual demeanor. Actually, his temper is even fiercer than mine. But I have to endure it even if I can't. Will he really turn hostile at a time like this? General Beigong has managed the Eastern Mountain Army for so many years. It's not something that others can pry open in a short period of time. My West Hill Army is the same. Anyway, there isn't too much danger for now. I can only endure it for now and think about it in the future. Only the Imperial Family's Hall of Masters. It is said that Xiang Chong is also unbearably angry. But that master usually keeps a low profile and is actually not someone who fights for power. He can't depose the crown prince, so he can only endure it. But he is Xiang Chong's imperial uncle. He went to reprimand Xiang Chong. But although Xiang Chong agreed verbally, he did not restrain his actions at all. Chu Xiu nodded inwardly. That's about enough. Once an impression was formed, it could not be changed. Through this incident, one could imagine how the military and the Imperial Family's Hall of Masters viewed Xiang Chong. And at present, other than Xiang Long, he would not listen to anyone else, not even his imperial uncle, Xiang Chong. But did Xiang Long have the energy to care about him now? Xiang Long was already doing his best to ensure that he did not die now. In this way, when Xiang Wu and the others' endurance reached the limit, it was uncertain what would happen at that time. Just as Chu Xiu wanted to ask about the details of the situation, a Jianghu Hall disciple hurriedly ran over to report that there was a problem at the Jianghu Hall. Shen Feiying had a conflict with the people from the Great Guangming Temple. The people from the Jianghu Hall had already gone to support them. Both sides were at daggers drawn. Hearing this, Xiang Wu cast a sympathetic look at Chu Xiu. These are troubled times. It seems that official Chu is having a hard time on your side. Chapter 936. Xiang Wu's sympathy made Chu Xiu a little depressed. This sudden incident directly disrupted Chu Xiu's plan. Food had to be eaten one bite at a time. Naturally, troubles had to be solved one by one. Previously, Chu Xiu's plan was to first deal with Xiang Chong and help Xiang Li ascend the throne. The Taoist and Buddhist lineages were found by Xiang Long. When the new emperor ascended the throne, Chu Xiu could naturally let the new emperor issue a decree to expel the Taoist and Buddhist lineages. Moreover, it was very simple to fall out. As long as the Northern Yan strictly ordered the people not to worship the Taoist and Buddhist lineages, the Great Light Temple and the Chunyang Dao sect could not do anything. They could control the pugilistic world, but they could not control the people of the Northern Yan unless they got rid of the Northern Yan Xiang family and replaced them with a royal family. However, who would have thought that the group of monks and Taoist priests would start to cause trouble so soon before the trouble on Xiang Chang's side was completely resolved? In fact, during this period of time, be it the Taoist and Buddhist lineages or the Jianghu Hall, these three parties were restraining themselves. Both the Daoist and Buddhist lineages focused on preaching. They tried their best to recruit talented young disciples. Chu Xiu planned to deal with Xiang Chong first. At this time, he did not want to be enemies with the Taoist and Buddhist lineages. However, the people of the Taoist, Buddhist and demon lineages did not like each other. Even if they suppressed their anger, there was no telling when the conflict would start, just like now. Chu Xiu snorted and asked Tangya to stop eating. He turned to Xiang Wu and said, "The Jianghu Hall has urgent matters to attend to. I won't accompany you." Xiang Wu nodded and said, I understand. After Chu Xiu and the others left, Xiang Wu looked at the large table in front of him that Tangya had almost finished eating. He wondered, did they pay the bill just now? In front of the giant spirit gang, Shen Feiying was confronting a group of monks with a group of giant spirit gang disciples. At this time, the giant spirit gang had completely become the vassal of the subduing martial hall. Shen Feiying was also Chu Xiu's #1 loyal dog, or rather, a mad dog. He would bite whoever he was told to bite. Of course, this was not because Shen Feiying was truly loyal, but because he had no choice but to be loyal. He had not obtained his position properly. He had colluded with Chu Xiu to kill the previous gang leader Fang Datong. That was how he had obtained the position of gang leader. Moreover, he now relied on the resources and techniques of the Jianghu Hall to step into the real pellet state. As a result, his everything was tied to Chu Xiu or the Jianghu Hall. The interests of both sides were bound together. He couldn't betray them at all. Because of this, when facing the people from the Great Light Temple, this group of monks that he could only look up to before, he did not give in at all. Masters, no matter how powerful the Great Light Temple is, you can't be so overbearing, right? Did the Great Light Temple ever put the Jianghu Hall in your eyes when you came to my giant spirit gang to ask for him? Have you ever put official Chu in your eyes? The leader of the Great Light Temple side was a middle-aged monk named Su Ning with a kind face. He was inconspicuous among the Su generation in the Great Light Temple. Although he was not the first seat in the Vajra courtyard, he was also responsible for helping Su Yan take charge of the Vajra courtyard. He was mainly responsible for teaching the disciples who had just joined the Vajra courtyard. However, he was not teaching martial arts, but was responsible for easing the stubborn flaws in the other party's mind. After all, the Vajra Heart Sutra of the Vajra courtyard could easily make one's anger rise. Su Ning's expression did not change as he said, "Gang leader Shen, it's not that the Great Light Temple is overbearing, but that the giant spirit gang has gone too far. Just now, the Great Light Temple was about to accept the Wang family's disciple into the temple, and then you destroyed the Wang family and took away the Wang family's disciple. Isn't this targeting the Great Light Temple?" The conflict between the Great Light Temple and the giant spirit gang was very simple. The Great Light Temple could come to the Northern Yan to preach, so naturally, they had to travel all over the Northern Yan Jianghu to find suitable disciples. Actually, the Great Light Temple had always given the people of Jianghu a bad impression. Most people felt that the Great Light Temple was too overbearing and liked to meddle in other people's business. Therefore, this time, the Great Light Temple changed their attitude from before. They visited some of the small forces in the Northern Yan and personally visited them to give pointers on the martial arts of the small forces. Of course, they also preached Buddhism at the same time, although basically no one was willing to listen to the latter. However, this also made many of the small forces lower their guard, and it really allowed the Great Light Temple to find many disciples who met their requirements. The Wang family's disciple was one of them. The Wang family was a small aristocratic family around Yanjing City, and the head of the Wang family was only in the physical invulnerability realm. Knowing that his son could become a disciple of the Great Light Temple, the head of the Wang family was very excited. He subconsciously thought that he had become someone who had a backer. His son was not even 20 years old and had not even begun to roam the Jianghu. He did not understand what it meant to become a monk in the Great Light Temple. He only knew that he seemed to have a backer who was thousands of times stronger than his father. However, to join the Great Light Temple, one still needed to undergo a series of rituals such as tonsure. The Great Light Temple was prepared to let the Wang family's disciple wait for a period of time until the Great Light Temple recruited a sufficient number of disciples, then they would undergo tonsure together. Who would have thought that after waiting for such a long time, an incident would occur? The Wang family happened to be under the control of the giant spirit gang. According to the rules of the Jianghu Hall, the Wang family had to give a portion of their monthly income to the giant spirit gang as a tribute. Now that the Wang family had a backer, they were naturally unwilling to hand over this portion of the tribute. They even had a conflict with the members of the giant spirit gang. The disciple of the Wang family was too young. In his anger, he did not hold back. He even ambushed and killed a member of the giant spirit gang. This angered Shen Feiying. If the Wang family had only said that their son was about to join the Great Light Temple, the giant spirit gang would not have forcefully taken that portion of the tribute. Chu Xiu had decided to deal with Xiang Chong first, so he had already instructed the people of the Jianghu Hall to make appropriate concessions to the Taoist and Buddhist sects in some small areas. However, now that someone had died, it was a slap in the face for the giant spirit gang. It was also a slap in the face for the Jianghu Hall and Chu Xiu. Therefore, Shen Feiying had ordered the extermination of the Wang family and the capture of the Wang family disciple. Big monk, don't accuse me. The Wang family disciple killed one member of the giant spirit gang, so the giant spirit gang will exterminate his entire family. The giant spirit gang is now following official Chu. If we can swallow this kind of insult, then we will be disgracing official Chu. Su Ning put his palms together and chanted the name of Buddha. This penniless monk does not want to talk about gratitude and grudges, right and wrong. However, killing is not too much. The dozens of members of the Wang family were all exterminated in the hands of the giant spirit gang. This killing is enough, right? The dead cannot be resurrected. This penniless monk will not kill dozens of members of the giant spirit gang to avenge the Wang family. Therefore, this penniless monk only asks Chief Shen to hand over the Wang family disciple to this penniless monk. Shen Feiying didn't even think about it and directly refused, impossible. It was this kid who killed them first. If we hand over the culprit, how will the other Northern Yen pugilistic world people look at the Jianghu Hall? Moreover, the giant spirit gang exterminated the Wang family. That kid must hate the giant spirit gang to the bone. How can I let this kid go and find trouble for myself in the future? Su Ning sighed and said, since this is the case, then there is no other way. Chief Shen does not want to hand over the person, so this penniless monk can only take him by force. As Su Ning's voice fell, the fierce and violent golden gang chi around his body suddenly erupted. The Vajra's angry eyes could destroy evil and subdue demons. Su Ning was one of the few people in the Vajra yard who could suppress the side effects of the angry eyes Vajra Heart Sutra with his own state of mind. Therefore, he appeared to be extremely calm most of the time. But even if he was calm, he was also from the Vajra yard. This angry eyes Vajra Heart Sutra was also fierce and extremely violent when it was performed to the extreme. The demon's subduing seal landed. Shen Feiying only took such a move, and he was directly blasted out. His internal organs were shaken, and he resisted spitting out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were full of horror. Shen Feiying had just stepped into the real pellet state not long ago, and his own strength and talent were indeed not good. Although he stepped into the real pellet state with the resources of the Jianghu Hall, his own strength was still very weak. In the same realm, the gap in combat power was also the same. Shen Feiying's strength was almost the worst in the real pellet state. He might even be inferior to the martial artists who came from the mall and were not familiar with the power system of the outside world. At least, his physical body was strong, and he was relatively resistant to beatings. Unlike him, he was almost beaten to vomit blood after just one move. Su Ning's face remained unchanged, and another demon subduing seal landed. Su Yan also told them before that the main purpose of coming to the Northern Yen sect was to preach. Grudges and troubles should be avoided as much as possible. Therefore, he didn't make a ruthless move this time. He just wanted to temporarily abolish Shen Feiying's combat power, save him, and leave. However, at this moment, a violent gust of wind suddenly exploded. The power was so strong that it caused Su Ning's expression to change abruptly. The demon-subduing seal abruptly changed its direction and blasted to the side. There was a loud explosion, and a burst of aura fluctuations burst out. Su Ning suddenly felt a huge force hitting his body. The golden Buddha aura around his body flourished, resisting this force, but he was still blasted back a few steps. When the smoke and dust dissipated, Yan Bugui stood there with a giant sword in his hand, expressionless. However, the ground where the two of them collided just now had a huge pit. Shen Feiying hurriedly said, "Master Yan came at the right time. Without Master Yan's timely rescue, I'm afraid our giant spirit gang can't stop these monks." Yan Bugui just glanced at Shen Feiying and didn't even say a word. Shen Feiying also knew the character of official Chu's confidant. The other party was not good with words, but it didn't matter as long as he knew how to fight. On the other hand, Su Ning frowned and thought, this is troublesome. Yan Bugui's name was not well known in the underworld, but in the Northern Yen sect, especially those who paid attention to the Jinwu Hall, everyone knew him. Chu Xiu dug out his confidant from the wilderness. He was powerful, ruthless, and quiet. He was definitely a difficult character to deal with. Chapter 937. The conflict with the giant spirit gang was actually because of a small matter. Su Ning originally did not want to make a big deal out of it. Originally, he thought that with the Great Light Temple stepping in, Shen Feiying would definitely let the person go. However, he did not expect Shen Feiying's attitude to be so tough. Now that even one of Chu Xiu's confidants, Yan Bugui, had come personally, the risk of this matter becoming a big deal had increased. Su Ning said in a low voice, "Lord Yan, is it worth it for the suppression hall to make such a big deal out of it with the Great Light Temple just for such an ordinary disciple?" Yan Bugui did not speak. He just raised the heavy sword in his hand and pointed it at Su Ning. His meaning was clear. He would kill whoever came. Just as Su Ning was about to say something, a cold voice suddenly said, "Is it worth it?" This is not a question of whether it is worth it or not. It is that no one can take him away from the hands of the suppression hall. Seeing that Chu Xiu had arrived with Mei Qinglian and the others, Su Ning immediately knew that this was not good. How did such a small matter provoke Chu Xiu? Su Ning's attitude was still very strong when facing Shen Feiying and the others. However, when facing Chu Xiu, he really did not have the qualifications to be tough. Su Ning put his palms together and said helplessly, "Official Chu, we do not want to take him away. It is just that the Wang family disciple is a disciple that the Great Light Temple is prepared to take in and shave his head. We just want him back." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Is that so? But what does this have to do with him killing people from the suppression hall? Putting aside the fact that he is not a disciple of the Great Light Temple, even if he has officially shaved his head and become a disciple of the Great Light Temple, do you think that he will be safe and sound after killing someone from the suppression hall? The people from the Great Light Temple think too highly of themselves." Su Ning's expression suddenly changed. Chu Xiu's words were somewhat like a slap in the face. At that moment, another group of monks walked over from afar. Su Yan led two old monks from the Temple of Great Light over with a grim expression. Su Yan could not be blamed for being anxious. This matter had happened too suddenly. He had not expected that his side would have a conflict with Chu Xiu so quickly. He had already heard about Su Ning's punishment from some of the disciples who had come to inform him. Su Ning's punishment was not wrong. The Great Temple of Light had already decided to take in the Wang clan's disciple. This matter had already been publicized by the Wang clan's clan leader. In the end, not only had the Wang family been annihilated, but if they had not gotten their people back, they would have lost face for the Great Guangming Temple. In the eyes of others, if the Great Light Temple could not even protect its own disciples, then what was the point of running to the Great Light Temple to be a monk? He even had to abstain from alcohol and women. If he was so useless, he might as well go to the Northern Yan imperial court and become a eunuch. Therefore, they had to return. Otherwise, the Great Light Temple's reputation would be tarnished. How could they continue to preach in the Northern Yan? They might as well return to the northern lands to recite their scriptures. Official Chu, for the sake of a Wang clan disciple, you actually took action personally. Is it worth it? Su Yan asked in a low voice. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, for the sake of a Wang clan disciple, didn't the Great Light Temple also send out 3 true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouses? Is it worth it? Su Yan shook his head and said, to the Great Light Temple, all lives are equal. If something had happened to Su Ning, the Great Light Temple would have done its best to save him. Now that something has happened to a disciple who has yet to enter the sect, the Great Light Temple will also do its best to save him. Chu Xiu laughed and said, what a good all lives are equal. Just nice, I, Chu Xiu, am the same. Everyone is equal in my eyes. There is no one I cannot kill. With that, Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, bring that Wang clan brat out. Shen Feiying was stunned. Was the Lord prepared to hand over the person? However, he did not dare to ask too much. He could only obediently bring the person out. That Wang clan disciple was very young. From the looks of it, he was not even 20 years old. At that moment, he was trembling in fear. He did not know at all how much of an impact he had caused because of his momentary impulse. Previously, when he was in the Wang clan, he was the only son of the Wang clan master and was doted on. Therefore, not only did the Wang clan master not bear to let him roam the martial world, he did not even let him interfere in the clan's matters. This also caused this Wang clan disciple to be fearless because he did not know anything. He did not know what the subduing martial hall represented, nor did he know what the Great Light Temple represented. However, he was not an idiot. Seeing so many powerhouses in front of him, he was so scared that he could not even say a word. The Great Light Temple wants this brat? He's very ordinary. I wonder what your Great Light Temple sees in him. A cold smile appeared on Chu Xiu's face as he said, a life for a life, and a debt must be repaid. This has been a rule since ancient times. Even your Great Light Temple cannot change it. Don't you want the person? Fine, I'll give the person to you, but I'll take his life back. It was not Su Yan's first time dealing with Chu Xiu. Looking at Chu Xiu's expression, he knew that something was going to happen. However, before he could speak, Chu Xiu snapped his fingers. In that instant, there was a slight fluctuation in the essence qi between heaven and earth. However, it was this slight fluctuation that affected the Wang clan disciple's heart, causing it to beat violently. It was this one beat that instantly shattered the Wang clan disciple's heart meridian, and he lost all signs of life in an instant. Seeing that the person he wanted was killed in front of him, Su Yan roared angrily, Chu Xiu. A life for a life, and a debt must be repaid? Your subordinates have already annihilated the entire Wang clan. Is it not enough to pay with their lives? Chu Xiu spread his hands and said, is that so? Sorry, I really forgot to ask about this. However, the result is the same. The lives of my Jianghu Hall people are more valuable, can't they? Chu Xiu's appearance could simply make people vomit blood. Su Yan couldn't stand it even if he had a good temper. Behind him, a glaring Vajra form bloomed, and a dazzling golden Buddha's light shone out. With a palm to subdue the demon, it blasted toward Chu Xiu with the power to shatter mountains and split the earth. Su Yan, an existence who had just stepped into the true fire spirit refinement state not long ago, Chu Xiu didn't take him seriously at all. When the other party was in the real pellet state, he didn't take him seriously. Now that he had stepped into the true fire spirit refinement state, Chu Xiu didn't take him seriously either. Taking a step forward, Chu Xiu's body was burning with inner force and true fire. He punched out, and the mountain and sea fist scripture carried a majestic might as it met the palm of the glaring Vajra. Chu Xiu's punch was very similar to Emperor Qin Qing's. Wherever the fist passed, mountains would shatter and the earth would crack. It was invincible. That powerful force caused Su Yan's expression to change. A crack appeared on the glaring Vajra form behind him under this punch, and the Buddha's light instantly dimmed. When he left the Great Light Temple, Su Jing told him to be careful of Chu Xiu. At that time, Su Yan thought that Su Jing was telling him to be careful of Chu Xiu's endless means. Now, he knew that Su Jing was also telling him to be careful of Chu Xiu's unreasonably strong strength. Seeing that Su Yan was unable to hold on any longer, the two Jing generation monks who had come with Su Yan did not hesitate to attack. They were already people who were nearing the end of their lifespans. They felt that it was a gain to be able to make one last contribution to the sect in this life. Naturally, they didn't care whether the siege would affect their reputation or not. The Buddha's light around one of the old monks condensed into runes that circled around him. As he pointed out the runes one by one, the Buddha's light runes turned into a matrix that enveloped Chu Xiu. If someone were to look from above, they would notice that the matrix was like a Buddha's lotus that was constantly blooming. Chu Xiu was in the center of the Buddha's lotus, and he was being suppressed by the endless Buddha's light. The other old monk was shrouded in an extreme Buddha's light. He chanted the name of Buddha, but it was not Amitabha. Instead, it was the Namo Unbreakable Vajra Buddha. The golden Buddha's light seemed to have dyed his entire person into a golden Buddha. As his palm landed, everywhere it passed by, even the vital chi of the universe began to crumble. It was just a simple palm, but it contained the most extreme power of Buddha's light. Among the old monks from the Great Light Temple, those who could survive until the end all had some tricks up their sleeves. All of them had trump cards that they could bring out. However, when Chu Xiu saw this scene, he snorted coldly. Do you really think that Buddha's light can suppress evil and slay demons? You guys have been practicing Buddhism all your lives, but I'm afraid you guys don't even know what Buddha is. As Chu Xiu's voice landed, his entire body also bloomed with a brilliant and magnificent Buddha's light. Amidst the scorching Buddha's light, Mahavairocana descended. His Dharma form was dignified, and as he put his palms together, endless Buddha's flames bloomed, instantly shattering the Buddha's lotus matrix. However, at the next moment, Chu Xiu's Dharma form of Mahavairocana underwent a strange change. The dignified Dharma form became angry and evil, and a black dot appeared between Mahavairocana's eyebrows. The black dot spread out like ink, and at the next moment, Mahavairocana had already turned into the Mahakala demon god, whose entire body was emitting apocalyptic flames. The extreme of light was darkness, and Mahavairocana was Mahakala. The palm landed, and the palm, which contained endless power of nirvanic destruction, sent the old monk, who was shrouded in Buddha's light, flying. The extremely domineering power of nirvanic destruction continued to corrode the Buddha's light, and the Buddha's light around the old monk began to shatter like a shattered armor. It fell to the ground, and even corroded a large pit in the ground. Chu Xiu took a step forward and said coldly, Buddha? In my territory, even Buddhas have to abide by the rules. Su Yan, from the first day you stepped into Yanjing City, you should have known that this day would come. Su Yan's face turned pale, and he was about to join the other two Jing cohort monks in attacking when a faint aura came from afar. Chu Xiu and Su Yan looked in that direction at the same time, and they both frowned. It was Shi Yunzi from the Chunyang Dao sect. Shi Yunzi merely watched from afar and did not come over. When he sensed Chu Xiu and Su Yan looking over, Shi Yunzi even waved at them, indicating that they could ignore him and continue. Seeing this, Su Yan snorted coldly, turned around, and left with his people. Chu Xiu's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but he did not continue to cause trouble for the Great Light Temple. Chapter 938. The biggest problem with the three lineages of Taoism, Buddhism, and Diabolism all gathered in one place was that no matter which side started the battle first, the last to benefit would be the side that won. Therefore, after seeing Shi Yunzi, Su Yan chose to leave directly. The disciple of the Wang family had already been killed. It would be useless for him to take action again except to vent his anger. It was the same for Chu Xiu. He still had a lot of troubles to deal with. How could he have the leisure to fight to the death with the people from the Great Guangming Temple? Because of the existence of the Chunyang Dao sect, the two sides could not fight for the time being. They each took a step back and could only stop for the time being. After causing such a big mess, Shen Feiying was still a little perturbed. He did not know if it was right for him to do so. Chu Xiu comforted Shen Feiying. He was so tough, but he did not lose the face of the Jinwu Hall. What was wrong with it? However, this matter was still a problem. It seemed that he had to modify his plan. Previously, Chu Xiu was ready to deal with Xiang Chong first, and then deal with the Taoist and Buddhist lineages. Now, Xiang Chong's layout was almost done. He just had to wait for Xiang Long to die. However, the problem was that Xiang Long was still stubbornly holding on. No one knew when he would die. It was impossible for Chu Xiu to assassinate Xiang Long now, so he had to continue to wait. However, during this period of waiting, it was obvious that the Taoist and Buddhist lineages were not so easy to deal with. Even if he did not provoke them, some accidents would still happen. This was the real problem. After returning to the Jinwu Hall, Chu Xiu had been thinking about this matter. In the end, before he could come up with a suitable solution, the Jinwu Hall was competing with the Chunyang Dao sect again. The reason was also the Jianghu forces of the Northern Yan. In the past, the Jinwu Hall ruled the Northern Yan martial arts world, or it could be said to suppress them. The advantage was that the entire Northern Yan martial arts world could not use weapons without permission, reducing the fighting between each other. However, the disadvantage was that all the sects under the jurisdiction of the Jinwu Hall had to offer offerings to the Jinwu Hall. When had these underworld forces ever suffered such a great injustice? To the Northern Yan imperial court, they were just like ordinary merchants who had to pay some taxes. As for the precious cultivation resources, they never had to pay taxes. The way Chu Xiu handled things was even more overbearing than the Northern Yan imperial court. However, although they were overbearing, the strength of the Jinwu Hall was still there. In the past, Chu Xiu had destroyed many families in the Northern Yan land. His ferocious might was still there, so even though the martial arts forces in the Northern Yan land were indignant, they did not dare to jump out and cause trouble. But this time, the arrival of Chunyang Dao sect and Great Guangming Temple made them see that their opportunity seemed to have come. He, Chu Xiu, was not the only one in the Northern Yan martial arts world. Although the Wang family was destroyed by the giant spirit gang, it also let others see that at least the Great Guangming Temple and Chunyang Dao sect dared to challenge the Jinwu Hall in the Northern Yan land. Therefore, many forces selected by the Chunyang Dao sect as disciples secretly colluded with each other to resist the warriors who came to collect the monthly salary from the Jinwu Hall. Moreover, they also learned from the previous lesson of the Wang family being destroyed. They even informed the Chunyang Dao sect in advance to come and directly confront the Jinwu Hall. When the news reached Chu Xiu's ears, Chu Xiu could not help but show a strong murderous intention in his eyes. Some people did not learn from their mistakes. Even when he had just entered the Northern Yan land a few years ago and killed many people, these people were still willing to plot against him for some benefits. Some people said that human nature was good, and some said that human nature was evil. But in Chu Xiu's view, human nature itself was a combination of various complex emotions and thoughts. Greed, anger, obsession, hate, love, evil desire, 7 emotions and 5 poisons were all present. At this time, it was also reasonable to say that this group of people was greedy. Over the years, Chu Xiu asked them to hand in their offerings. Every time they paid, their hearts would hurt as if their flesh was cut. At this time, they got the opportunity, but this group of people could not stand it anymore. They jumped out, to court death. This could not be opened. The Jinwu Hall suppressed the Northern Yan martial arts world by relying on knives and rules. If he did not do anything this time, it would be breaking the rules. Therefore, after he just attacked the Great Guangming Temple, Chu Xiu could only attack the Chunyang Dao sect again. At this time, in the Yanjing city branch of the Chunyang Dao sect, Shi Yunzi and his martial uncle Mako Mori were actually not very clear about this matter. This was the decision of those small forces. After they had discussed it and forced the people of the Jinwu Hall away, they reported to the Chunyang Dao sect and asked for their protection. In fact, they were forcing the Jianghu Hall to abdicate because they knew that the Chunyang Dao sect would not ignore them. Otherwise, how could the Chunyang Dao sect gain a foothold in the northern Yan land? After hearing this news, Shi Yunzi's expression suddenly changed, and he scolded loudly, "Bastard! Idiot! Idiot!" Shi Yunzi had never been serious before, and it was rare for him to even be angry. At this time, the disciples of the Chunyang Dao sect were shocked when they saw Shi Yunzi's sudden rage. It was no wonder that Shi Yunzi was furious at this time. He even had the intention to kill. This group of small forces usually did not think about making progress. It was not easy for them to have a little cleverness, but in the end, they used it to plot against the Jianghu Hall. But in fact, they had outsmarted themselves. It could even be said that they were playing with fire. He had seen the conflict between Chu Xiu and the Great Guangming Temple before. At the moment, Chu Xiu was definitely not having a good time. If this group of people did not want to pay the offerings, they could use the Chunyang Dao sect to refute them in a neither soft nor hard manner when the disciples of the Jianghu Hall came to collect the offerings. The Jianghu Hall would definitely not continue to be tough. There was no need to make this matter public, and the Jianghu Hall would not publicize it. In the end, the meat would be rotten in the pot, and no matter how it was eaten, it would be their own. In the end, this group of idiots joined forces to rebel against the Jianghu Hall and broke the rules set by the Jianghu Hall. This was simply challenging the bottom line of Chu Xiu. According to Shi Yunzi's understanding of Chu Xiu, at this time, he was probably already on the way to kill people with his saber. Mako Mori, who was rumored to have a bad temper, was very calm at this time. He stood up and said faintly, "It's useless even if you scold me. If this Jianghu was full of rational people, if they were all smart people, then there would not be so many gratitude and grudges, and there would not be so many killings in the Jianghu. In fact, most of the people in this Jianghu are actually idiots who think they are smart, including my Chunyang Dao sect. There are many such people. If you need to fight, kill, or fight, then come. I will follow you to the northern Yan, and I can't help you with my old brain. The sect master sent me here to prepare me to raise my sword and kill people at the critical moment. Now, I really want to see how amazing the person who is known to be the most outstanding among this generation of young people can be." Shi Yunzi looked at Mako Mori with some surprise. It was said that this martial uncle had a bad temper, but now it seemed that he was the one who saw through it the most. He did not know what he experienced when he was in closed-door cultivation that could make his state of mind change so much. At this time, in a manor outside Yanjing City, in the Feng family manor, the martial artists of several forces gathered. This time, they joined forces to expel the martial artists who were collecting offerings from the Jianghu Hall, and they used the Chunyang Dao sect as a shield. In fact, there were many forces that were selected by the Chunyang Dao sect to be disciples in the entire northern Yan, and it was far from just these few forces. The younger generation of the Chunyang Dao sect had a shortage of young people, so they were not as strict as the Great Light Temple in recruiting disciples. It was fine as long as they were a little passable. However, the other forces were a little timid. After hearing that they were going to join forces to resist the Jianghu Hall, they were so scared that they closed their doors and refused to see any guests. There were only a few people present who were brave. However, after doing it, they were a little flustered. After doing it, they only knew how to be afraid. Chu Xiu's murderous nature was well known in the pugilistic world. Could the Chunyang Dao sect stop him? Moreover, the news had already been released. Why hadn't the Chunyang Dao sect come? One of them clapped his hands and said regretfully, "Sigh, back then I said, don't do this, don't do it. Even if you want to do it, you have to be safe. You have to test the pure Yang Dao sect's attitude before doing it. Now, the people from the Chunyang Dao sect haven't come yet. I'm afraid the Jianghu Hall has already received the news. What if the Chunyang Dao sect is a step behind?" A gloomy old man sitting on the main seat snorted coldly. "Are you regretting it now? It's too late. Since it has already been done, there is no room for regret. What's the use of complaining? This is a big gamble. If we win, we will no longer have to be oppressed by the Jianghu Hall. Even we, the pioneers, can become famous in the Northern Yan martial arts world. This old man was the current villa master of Fengjia village. This time, he was the first to propose to join forces. Someone hesitated and said, "But what if we lose the gamble?" Villa Master Feng sneered and said, "Lose the gamble? If we lose, our whole family will be exterminated and we will be doomed eternally." Everyone present suddenly fell silent. However, at this moment, a disciple of Fengjia village ran in awkwardly and said while trembling, Villa Master. Bad news. Chu Xiu has brought the people from the Jianghu Hall to fight." Upon hearing this, everyone present suddenly turned pale as if the end of the world had come. The man who spoke previously held his head and trembled as if he was about to cry. He kept murmuring, I told you not to be so hasty. Now that the god of death, Chu Xiu, is here, our whole family will be exterminated and we will all die." Although Villa Master Feng's face was also pale, he still stood up and kicked the man. He scolded, "Since we are all going to die, we might as well die with dignity." Now that Chu Xiu is being suppressed by the Northern Yan Imperial Court, he is not having a good time. After we go out, try to delay as much as possible. As long as we can delay until the Chunyang Dao sect arrives, we will be saved. Villa Master Feng was still considered courageous as he led his people out of Fengjia village. Seeing that Chu Xiu had already brought a group of Suppression Martial Hall's ancient martial art practitioners to surround the entire Feng family village, Village Master Feng forcefully cupped his hands and said, "Lord Chu, now that the disciples of our clans have already joined the Pure Yang Dao sect, regarding the matter of the offerings, before Villa Master Feng could finish speaking, Chu Xiu had already waved his hand expressionlessly and spat out a word, kill. Chapter 939. The strength of Chu Xiu's killing intent was something that Village Master Feng and the rest could not imagine at all. Previously, they were prepared to talk nonsense with Chu Xiu here to delay the time and wait for the people from Chunyang Dao sect to arrive. In the end, who would have thought that Chu Xiu would not even give them a chance to speak and would kill them directly? Seeing that the martial artists from Jianghu Hall were already rushing towards them with swords and sabers in their hands, even Village Master Feng, who could still pretend to be calm, had turned pale. At this moment, a low shout suddenly came. Wait! Scorching pure yang qi swept over, and the disciples of Chunyang Dao sect blocked in front of them. Seeing that the people from Chunyang Dao sect had finally arrived, Village Master Feng and the rest were so excited that they were about to cry. They covered their chests and heaved a sigh of relief. This kind of ups and downs between life and death was too exciting. They could not take it if it happened a few more times. Looking at the people from Chunyang Dao sect, Chu Xiu sneered. A few days ago, I just had a fierce battle with Great Guangming Temple. I did not expect that it would be Chunyang Dao sect's turn again today. Do all of you think that I, Chu Xiu, am easy to bully, and everyone wants to step on me? Shi Yunzi glared at Village Master Feng and the rest and sighed. If I said that I really did not know about this matter, would you believe me? Chu Xiu asked in return, do you think I would believe you? Shi Yunzi spread his hands and said, so, in the end, we still have to fight. My Chunyang Dao sect really does not want to fight with you at this time. Can't you let these people go? Chu Xiu shook his head and said, those who break the rules must die. Mako Mori stepped forward and said with a smile, there's no need to say so much. If people like Chu Xiu could be easily persuaded, he wouldn't be Chu Xiu. Let's see who's the real deal. Suddenly, Shi Yunzi stopped Mako Mori. He spat out a mouthful of blood onto the pure yang sword in his hand and handed it over to Mako Mori. In the entire Chunyang Dao sect, Shi Yunzi was the only one who could perfectly use the divine weapons pure yang. Right now, his blood essence was attached to the pure yang, allowing Mako Mori to temporarily use the pure yang for a period of time. Mako Mori said with a faint smile, you don't believe in your martial uncle's strength? Shi Yunzi shook his head and said, of course I do, but this Chu Xiu has too many trump cards, we have to be careful. He remembered that during the last great war between the righteous and demonic sects, Ling Yunzi could not defeat Chu Xiu even though he was half a step into the mystic illuminating realm. Although the others did not know that Chu Xiu was actually on the verge of death at that time, Chu Xiu's powerful strength still left a deep impression on Shi Yunzi. Although Mako Mori was a powerhouse of the previous generation, combat power had nothing to do with age. Only God knew how big a breakthrough he had made after so many years of closed-door cultivation. To be safe, it was better to take the pure yang divine weapon first. Mako Mori took the pure yang divine weapon, and a look of reminiscence suddenly appeared in his eyes. The pure yang divine weapon of the Chunyang Dao sect had protected the Chunyang Dao sect for so many years, but there were not many people who were qualified to use the pure yang in every generation. In the previous generation of the Chunyang Dao sect, only one person could use the pure yang. That person used the pure yang sword to teach them, the disobedient junior fellow apprentices, a lesson. The look of reminiscence only lasted for a moment before it disappeared. Now was not the time to reminisce. Looking at Chu Xiu, Mako Mori said lightly, Ling Yunzi actually suffered a loss in your hands. It's really unexpected. I'm also a person who is about to die. I didn't expect that I can still meet the most outstanding young man of this generation. It's a blessing. In the past, when Mako Mori was not in closed-door cultivation, Ling Yunzi was already famous in the Chunyang Dao sect. He was even an outstanding figure who was famous in the entire underworld. In the entire Chunyang Dao sect, he was the only one who was qualified to be the headmaster. As a result, in the hands of this Chu Xiu, Ling Yunzi suffered a loss. He couldn't defeat Chu Xiu with all his strength. This really surprised Mako Mori, especially when the opponent's current realm was strictly speaking, just a real pellet state. Of course, for Chu Xiu, the realm could no longer be used to measure him. Looking at Mako Mori, Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly and said, Younger generation? Actually, I don't like someone imposing such a symbol on me. The underworld is the underworld. Whether it is the new generation or the old generation, who doesn't fight in this underworld? I have experienced the younger generation of the underworld, and I can also compete with the older generation of the underworld. Since we are all mingling in this underworld, no one will respect the old and love the young. In that case, why do we care about the younger generation and the older generation? In this underworld, there is no big or small, only victory or defeat is important. Mako Mori laughed and said, Only victory or defeat is important. I have lived for hundreds of years, but I didn't expect that I can't see it as clearly as a junior like you. But it doesn't matter. It's not like I haven't lost in my life. I'm about to die. It doesn't matter if I win or lose. I'm not afraid of others saying that I'm bullying the young. As Mako Mori's voice fell, the next moment, the divine weapon pure yang in his hands suddenly bloomed with a dazzling brilliance. In the sky and on the ground, everything was shrouded by the brilliance of this sword. It was as if the sun had descended, and all the evil in the world were crushed and obliterated. Seeing this scene, Chu Xiu's heart suddenly shuddered, and at the same time, he secretly thought that he was lucky. A weapon was a weapon after all. Only a person who was strong enough could exert the effect of the weapon itself. The pure yang sword in the hands of Shi Yunzi was indeed very strong, but it could only reach the peak of the real pellet state. But now that the pure yang sword was in the hands of Mako Mori, although it couldn't exert its full power, its power was shocking enough. When Chu Xiu and Ling Yunzi fought in the past, it was a battle between the righteous and demonic factions. It wasn't just the victory or defeat between Chu Xiu and Ling Yunzi. Therefore, in order to maximize its power, Ling Yunzi didn't forcibly use the pure yang sword. Instead, he handed it over to Shi Yunzi, making Shi Yunzi a strong combat power. Last time, if Ling Yunzi was like Mako Mori now and temporarily controlled the pure yang sword with the power of Shi Yunzi's blood essence, although Chu Xiu wouldn't be defeated so quickly, he definitely wouldn't be able to hold on for so long. At this time, Mako Mori was holding the divine weapon pure yang tightly. The familiar power reminded him of those familiar people in the past. He shook his head with a wry smile. He was old, and even in battle, he couldn't concentrate. But with his age, this battle would probably be his last, right? As this thought flashed through his mind, Mako Mori slashed down with his sword, and the pure yang energy that filled the sky suddenly condensed into a line. The golden line didn't look like sword chi, but wherever it passed, the heat caused the space to distort. The heavenly Dao war case in Chu Xiu's hand instantly condensed into the peerless heavenly blade. He slashed out with the sea-cleaving slash, and a violent and turbulent power stirred up the power of heaven and earth, going straight for the sword. Now, when Chu Xiu attacked, his martial arts leaned toward suppressing his opponent with brute force. No matter how many variations there were, he could still break them with brute force. This kind of martial arts was easy to say, but it was difficult to do. After all, in the pugilistic world, it was almost impossible to find a second warrior like Chu Xiu, who had accumulated such power at the same level as him. In the face of the sword that had the power to shatter mountains and break seas, the silk line on Mako Mori's sword began to twist strangely, and it coiled. The pure yang sword chi of extreme yang, in the hands of Mako Mori, showed a strange kind of gentleness. The golden sword chi was like a silk line, and in an instant, it had directly strangled the power of Chu Xiu's sword. Chu Xiu's eyes narrowed. This Mako Mori had probably found another path in the martial arts of the Chunyang Dao sect. The combination of hardness and softness, the pure yang energy of extreme yang, was actually used by him to feel feminine, but the power was on a higher level. The slender but scorching pure yang energy of extreme yang wrapped around Chu Xiu. Almost in an instant, the area of 100 feet around Chu Xiu was enveloped by the scorching sword silk. The pure yang energy was so hot that it even melted the surrounding soil, and the power could be said to be extremely domineering. The two completely different powers, one hard and one soft, gathered in one body, and the power was extremely terrifying. Being in the middle of the scorching pure yang energy, Chu Xiu's expression did not change at all. He formed a seal with both hands, and in the next moment, the sun-changing technique was performed. The Dharma form of Vairocana, which also carried a scorching Buddhist light, appeared behind him. The majestic Buddhist light shone, and Vairocana put his palms together. A strange Buddhist voice was uttered, but in the next moment, the Buddhist flame that could suppress evil and kill demons turned into an extremely evil world-destroying fire. Vairocana evolved into the great darkness Mahakala, and two more arms grew behind him, completely tearing the sword silk apart. Mako Mori's expression changed slightly. He had never seen such an evil power before. It was similar to devil chi, but it was definitely not devil chi. Most importantly, this power actually evolved from the Buddhist light. Could it be that it was invented by those monks? To be able to research such a power, it was unlikely that they were good monks. At this moment, Chu Xiu had already formed a seal with both hands, and a longbow made of devil chi appeared in the middle of the Mahakala devil god's Dharma form behind him. With one arm holding the bow and the other three on the bowstring, the triple city extinguishing arrow, which was burning with world-destroying fire, shot out with a loud bang. Everywhere it passed, even the essence chi of the world was evaporated by the world-destroying fire on the arrow. Feeling the power in the arrow, Mako Mori's figure retreated hurriedly. He was old, and his physical strength, inner force, and vital energy were not at their peak. Against a young man like Chu Xiu, whose essence, chi, and spirit were all at their peak, he was actually at a disadvantage. Therefore, in the face of this evil arrow, Mako Mori's first reaction was to dodge. However, at the moment he dodged, an even more mysterious power enveloped his entire body. In fact, before he could even take a step, the triple city extinguishing arrow had already locked onto him. From the moment that Chu Xiu's arrow was released, it had already locked onto Mako Mori's entire body that could be dodged. Chapter 940. The heaven sun gazing at air mystic technique was a perfect match for the triple city extinguishing arrow. At the very least, as long as the opponent's strength could not suppress Chu Xiu, it was basically impossible for them to escape the heaven sun gazing at air deduction. Mako Mori recalled the number of times he had to dodge. Seeing that he could no longer dodge, the pure yang sword in his hand emitted a scorching glow. With the sword in his right hand, he formed a Dao seal with his left hand. Pure Yang suppressed evil, slaying demons with his sword. The Pure Yang sword clashed with the triple annihilation city arrow. The black power of nirvanic extermination and the scorching Pure Yang astral chi burst out. Within a radius of a few hundred feet, the vegetation instantly withered, and any vitality was wiped out. Following that, the scorching Pure Yang power spread like magma, causing the soil and rocks to melt. Manor Lord Feng and company, who had provoked this matter, turned pale. It was only at this moment that they realized exactly how stupid of a thing they had done. Be it the Chunyang Dao sect's Mako Mori or Chu Shou, both of them stood at the pinnacle of the pugilistic world. They were like gods or Buddhas. Yet, he had used his own schemes to speculate on them. He was dancing on the tip of a knife, with a sea of fire beneath him. After the triple city extinguishing arrow clashed with the Pure Yang sword, Chu Shou frowned slightly. For the first time, the triple city extinguishing arrow had lost its effect. Although the power of nirvanic extermination was extremely domineering, Ancestor Lu's divine weapon, the Pure Yang, had a power that was likely left behind by Ancestor Lu. It had directly neutralized the power of nirvanic extermination of the triple city extinguishing arrow, preventing it from spreading. Furthermore, after exchanging a few blows, he had already sensed that the old Daoist, Mako Mori, had lived for such a long time. His strength was actually far inferior to Ling Yunzi's. Even the current Chu Shou could match the old Daoist, Mako Mori, in terms of pure strength. However, having lived for so long, he had actually cultivated the Chunyang Dao sect's incomparably ferocious Pure Yang astral chi to the point where it was both hard and soft. It was extremely difficult to deal with. Chu Shou wasn't afraid of his opponent, but he wasn't sure if he could take him down. Moreover, Chu Shou could guarantee that at this time, there were definitely people from the Great Guangming Temple watching from the sidelines. They could not wait for both sides to fight to the death. As Chu Shou continued to fight with Mako Mori, he said to Mei Qinglian, "Do it. Destroy these few families. Leave no one alive." He was only here to kill, not to determine a victor with the Pure Yang Dao sect. However, Shi Yunzi and the others were naturally prepared. Although there were not many people from Chunyang Dao's sect who came this time, they were all elites. It would be an exaggeration to use these people to fight against the Jianghu Hall, but it was still enough to block Mei Qinglian and the others. While resisting, Shi Yunzi said, "Official Chu, where it is possible to forgive people, one should forgive them. I also hate that these people are brainless, but there is still the Great Guangming Temple watching from the sidelines. Do you really have to fight to the death with my Chunyang Dao sect? How about this, both of us take a step back. You let them go once, and I will let them make up for the offerings. What do you think?" As Chu Shou attacked, he said coldly, "Take a step back? If my Jianghu Hall takes a step back, it will be difficult for us to go further in the future. The Jianghu Hall will not compromise, nor will we give in. Some rules must be followed. The price of violating them is death." Shi Yunzi furrowed his brows. He had always known that Chu Shou could be said to be a very tough person. It was not that easy to make him take a step back. However, the problem was that if Chu Shou did not take a step back, was it worth it for the Chunyang Dao sect to fight to the death with Chu Shou here? However, if they took the initiative to retreat, the reputation of Chunyang Dao sect in the northern Yen would be completely ruined. At the very least, they would not be able to compete with the Great Guangming Temple. Just as Shi Yunzi was in a dilemma, there was a movement in the distance. Everyone looked over and saw that it was Tangya leading a group of people from the northern Yen Jianghu sections. Of course, looking at their appearance, most of them were unwilling. They were forced to come here by Tangya and the others. Shi Yunzi was stunned. He did not know what Chu Shou wanted to do. However, at this time, Chu Shou broke away from the battle and retreated more than 100 feet. He said coldly to the people from the northern Yen forces, "The Feng clan and the others did not respect the rules of the Jianghu Hall. They should be punished. I am very pleased that you did not collude with the Feng clan and the others. Therefore, I will give you a chance to eliminate the Feng clan and the other forces." Those who take action will be exempted from a year's tribute. Hearing this, Xianxia and the people from the Chunyang Dao sect were so angry that they almost vomited blood. No one expected Chu Xiu to have such a trick up his sleeve. He actually encouraged other forces from the northern Jianghu world to take action against Villa Master Feng and the others. In fact, before coming here, Chu Xiu had thought that even if the Chunyang Dao sect really did not know about this matter concerned the reputation of the Chunyang Dao sect, so they would definitely take action. At that time, Chu Xiu still did not know how strong Mako Mori was. If he was weak, then he would directly eliminate the Chunyang Dao sect and eliminate those few families. But if Mako Mori could stop him, then it was time for the others to play a role. Therefore, he secretly asked Tanya to bring this group of people here as a precaution. Seeing this, Xianxia hurriedly shouted to those people, "You listened to Chu Xiu's order to kill the northern Jianghu people. Have you never thought that one day, you will also be killed by others?" Even if there was the temptation of Chu Xiu waiving a year's tribute, the people present were still a little hesitant. The reason for their hesitation was also what Xianxia said: the fox grieves when the rabbit dies. Today, Villa Master Feng and the others provoked Chu Xiu and ended up in such a situation. If they provoked Chu Xiu in the future, they would probably also end up in such a situation. Seeing these people hesitating, Chu Xiu said coldly, "You don't want to take action? Well, you don't want to take action." This time, with the Chunyang Dao sect protecting the Feng family village and the other forces, the Jianghu Hall can't destroy them. After that, the Jianghu Hall will destroy you. If you don't want the people of the Feng family village to die, then you will be the ones to die. Anyway, someone broke the rules of the Jianghu Hall, and someone has to pay with their life. As soon as this statement came out, everyone present was stunned. They looked at Chu Xiu with disbelief. They had never seen such a shameless person. It was said that when the city gate was on fire, the fish in the moat would also be affected. However, they were far away from the city gate, so what did it have to do with them? Moreover, they believed that Chu Xiu would definitely do such a shameless thing. Therefore, the forces present gritted their teeth and immediately rushed to kill Villa Master Feng and the others. The people of the Chunyang Dao sect could stop the Jianghu Hall, but how could they have the strength to stop the other forces? Moreover, even if they could stop them, how could they take action? After all, the Chunyang Dao sect still wanted to preach in the northern Yen sect. Therefore, everyone could only watch the Feng family village and the other forces connected with it being torn into pieces. In less than a quarter of an hour, the entire Feng family village was covered in blood. Villa Master Feng and the others were in despair. They didn't even resist and just let the killing happen. Originally, when they saw Chu Xiu coming, they were in despair once. Later, when the Chunyang Dao sect came, they had hope again. As a result, the Chunyang Dao sect didn't stop Chu Xiu, and the people of the other northern Yen forces began to kill again. This immediately made them fall into despair. After going up and down several times, they were scared to death even if they weren't killed. They would still be killed if they stretched out their heads, so they might as well end it quickly. The entire Feng family village and the other forces were slaughtered. The people of the Chunyang Dao sect had stopped and didn't stop the Jianghu Hall anymore. They were already dead, so what was the point of stopping them? Xianxia and Mako Mori looked gloomy. It was the first time they saw someone as ruthless as Chu Xiu. Mako Mori suddenly laughed and said, "Ruthless. Vicious. It's a pity that you were born in the wrong era. If you were born 500 years ago, I'm afraid no one would be able to stop you." 500 years ago, the Kunlun devil cult dominated the Jianghu. At that time, no matter how ruthless and vicious Chu Xiu was, there was no trouble. On the contrary, he would be put in an important position by the Kunlun devil cult. However, now was not the time for the diabolism to dominate the Jianghu. The Jianghu was dominated by the righteous sects. Mako Mori's meaning was obvious. Chu Xiu was arrogant and overbearing now, but the current Jianghu wouldn't tolerate him forever. Chu Xiu didn't care about the meaning of Mako Mori's words. He just said lightly, "There's no need to do it 500 years ago. The current era is good enough. Whether it was Mako Mori or Shi Yunzi, they didn't have the leisure to argue with Chu Xiu here. He had been killed by Chu Xiu. They were definitely going to lose face. However, just like the time at the Great Guangming Temple, they couldn't fight a desperate battle with Chu Xiu now. Of course, the Chunyang Dao sect was stronger than the Great Guangming Temple because they had already recruited the disciples they wanted. As long as the disciples in these families met the requirements, they were all gathered in the Chunyang Dao sect's branch at the moment. Therefore, they managed to escape the disaster. Although it would definitely be a huge blow if they knew about this matter, it would be a good thing if some disciples could work harder to cultivate and motivate themselves under this kind of hatred. Therefore, seeing that everyone was dead, the Chunyang Dao sect could only leave helplessly. After returning to the Jianghu Hall, Chu Xiu asked people to spread this matter throughout the northern Jianghu. After making an example out of others, he began to have a headache. After offending the Great Guangming Temple once and the Chunyang Dao sect again, Chu Xiu didn't suffer any losses. However, not suffering 2 losses did not mean that he wouldn't suffer losses in the future. The Great Guangming Temple and the Chunyang Dao sect kept stirring up trouble back and forth. Chu Xiu couldn't ignore it as it consumed his own energy. More importantly, the Jianghu Hall originally had the authority in the northern Jianghu. In the end, the Great Guangming Temple and the Chunyang Dao sect kept stirring up trouble back and forth, which would also affect the reputation of the Jianghu Hall. Originally, Chu Xiu planned to wait until the problem with the northern Yan royal family was solved before dealing with these 2 factions. However, it seemed that some plans needed to be changed now. After thinking about it for 2 days, Chu Xiu had a more reliable plan. However, this plan didn't need him to carry it out. Instead, it needed a bold and careful young martial artist. Chapter 941. Why did the Chunyang Dao sect and the Great Light Temple come to the northern Yan? To put it simply, they were not here to expand their influence, but to look for suitable disciples. The Great Light Temple had always been strict in their selection of disciples, so even with their reputation, there were not many disciples that could catch the eye of the Great Light Temple. Moreover, even if some disciples were chosen by the Great Light Temple and had their tongues shaved, after entering the Great Light Temple, they would need to be a novice monk for a period of time. They would not be taught martial arts, but would need to recite Buddhist scriptures and train their bodies. Only after passing would they be selected by the 3 great Zen halls or the 6 great martial academies based on their performance. Although the younger generation of the Chunyang Dao sect was lacking in talent, so they had relaxed their standards, but not everyone could join them. Just look at the disciples that the Chunyang Dao sect had selected in the northern Yan during this period of time. Almost all of them were the more outstanding among the young people of the loose cultivators, or the disciples of the major forces who performed well. Therefore, compared to the Great Light Temple, the Chunyang Dao sect actually cared more about these disciples and successors. Since that was the case, Chu Xiu would give them a disciple, a genius disciple, that would make them ecstatic. Although it seemed that Chu Xiu's trick was the same as sending Daoist Wuxiang to Xiangchang's side, in reality, it was much more difficult than the former. Daoist Wuxiang was an old fox, and with Xiangchang's current situation, it was easy to fool him. However, the pure Yang Taoism sect was not something that Xiangchang could compare to. Although Shi Yunzi looked like he was joking around and was a little unreliable, he was not someone to be trifled with. There was also that old monster, Shou Zhenzi. Therefore, the most important thing about this matter was that the person who came to execute it had to be extremely cautious. If this was before Chu Xiu became famous, he would have the guts to do this, but now, there were not many young people around him who could do this. After thinking for a long time, Chu Xiu finally thought of a suitable person to do this. This person was his chief disciple, or rather, his half-successor, Yi Xiao. Yi Xiao's growth was witnessed by Chu Xiu. Even his current personality was deliberately seduced by Chu Xiu, and nurtured. Back then, he had been a spy for Sun Zhongming for such a long time, so he already had experience. Now that he was in the hands of the Chunyang Dao sect, although it was a little more difficult, Yi Xiao was no longer the Yi Xiao from before. Right now, Yi Xiao was working as a hitman in the Azure Dragon Society's headquarters. He had Duanmu Qianshan's guidance, and he didn't lack any cultivation resources. On top of that, he was able to fight and kill on a regular basis. Yi Xiao had already stepped into the Five Energies origin stage, which was considered very advanced for someone his age. After Chu Xiu made his choice, he immediately notified the Blue Dragon Society and told them to bring Yi Xiao over. A month later, the people from the Blue Dragon Society had already arrived. Moreover, not only Yi Xiao, but Mu Zi had also come. Along with them were Han Lei, Song Xiao, and hundreds of elite assassins from the Blue Dragon Society's headquarters. Chu Xiu said in surprise, "I only asked Yi Xiao to come. Why did you bring so many people?" Mu Zi said softly, "Foster father said that young master is currently in trouble. The Blue Dragon Society's assassins may not be of much use in the light, but they are very useful in dealing with secret matters or gathering intelligence in the dark." Speaking up to this point, Mu Zi also secretly sized up Mei Qinglian with some hostility in her eyes. She wouldn't say that she was worried that young Master Chu would be bewitched by that demoness every day and that she was jealous, so she begged Duanmu Qianshan to bring people over. Mei Qinglian also felt Mu Zi's gaze, but she smiled disdainfully. Coming from the Yin demon sect, what hasn't she seen before? Mu Zi is still too young. Her status is too low, to the point that I can't bear to bully her. Chu Xiu didn't pay attention to the confrontation between the two women. Of course, he didn't have the time to pay attention. He directly said, "You came at the right time. The Blue Dragon Society's branches will be spread throughout the northern Yan region, mainly to monitor the movements of the Buddhist and Daoist sections. Yi Xiao, come with me." Following behind Chu Xiu, Yi Xiao was also very excited. To be honest, although Chu Xiu taught him many things, he didn't expect to become Chu Xiu's personal disciple. However, even if it was just teaching him, it would be enough for Yi Xiao to live a comfortable life in the Blue Dragon Society. However, people are ambitious, and Yi Xiao was the same. Previously, when he was bullied in the Yi family, Yi Xiao's dream was to one day live with dignity. But now, Yi Xiao only had one dream, and that was to stand out. To stand out, he didn't rely on his mouth, but on his fists and knives. Chu Xiu had taught Yi Xiao a lot of things. However, what Yi Xiao truly remembered was that in this world of martial arts, power, fame, and even freedom were not given by others. Instead, they were fought for with the weapons in their hands. Therefore, in the headquarters of the Blue Dragon Society, Yi Xiao could clearly rely on Chu Xiu's legacy to live a comfortable life, but he still trained with all his might and went on missions with all his might. That kind of desperation made even veteran assassins like Han Cry and Song Xiao shudder. This kid seemed to be born to kill, and if he didn't go on a mission for a day, his whole body would feel uncomfortable. In fact, Yi Xiao didn't like missions, nor did he like killing people. At his current age, the fastest way to increase his cultivation wasn't through pills, nor was it through closed-door training, but through life and death battles. This time, when he received news from Chu Xiu, Yi Xiao was ecstatic. He had finally made it to the point where Chu Xiu needed him. As long as he could appear in front of Chu Xiu, Yi Xiao was confident that he could complete any mission that Chu Xiu gave him. Time was of the essence, so Chu Xiu didn't waste any more words with Yi Xiao. He just asked, "Do you understand the situation in the northern Yan?" Yi Xiao nodded. "I almost know. The northern Yan Emperor Xiang Long burned the bridge after crossing the river, bringing in the Buddhist and Daoist sects to suppress you. Who did you send me here to kill this time?" Chu Xiu waved his hand. "This time, I didn't send you to kill someone. If you really want to kill someone, don't be fooled by the fact that you've trained in the Blue Dragon Society for so long. My subordinates are much more agile than you. This time, not only am I not sending you to kill someone, but I'm also preparing to send you to the side of the Chunyang Dao sect, making you the most important disciple of the Chunyang Dao sect." Yi Xiao nodded and said, "Understood. I often used this tactic when I was in the Azure Dragon Association. When I encounter a difficult target, there are many people around to protect me, so I think of a way to change my identity and mix in with them, waiting for an opportunity to assassinate them. Chu Xiu slapped his forehead. This kid had been in the Blue Dragon Society for too long, and it seemed like he was used to it. Everything that came to him, the ultimate goal was to kill someone. This wasn't good. Killing someone was just a means to achieve the goal, not the main goal. Wrong. I sent you to the Chunyang Dao sect not to kill the people of the Chunyang Dao sect, but to kill the people of the Great Light Temple. Chu Xiu pointed at Yi Shao and said, you must use the identity of the Chunyang Dao sect to kill the people of the Great Light Temple. I'm almost done with the arrangements here in the Northern Yan, but the Buddhist and Daoist sects keep giving me trouble from time to time. If I don't get rid of them first, they might cause more trouble for me. However, because of my existence, the Buddhist and Daoist sects can't really fight to the death. Now, the Daoist, Buddhist, and demon sects are attacking each other. We're wary of each other, but we're also enduring each other. In the end, the three of us will still be the ones to exhaust our strength. It had to be said that Xiang Long's plan was already half successful. He had attracted the Daoist, Buddhist, and demon sects. The three sects were hostile toward each other, but they were also wary of each other. Even if all three sects were restraining themselves, there was no lack of conflicts. In less than 3 months, Chu Xiu had already fought a battle with the Great Light Temple and attacked the Chunyang Dao sect. Moreover, this was just a grudge between Chu Xiu and the two sections. The Chunyang Dao sect and the Great Light Temple had already clashed several times. The Great Light Temple and the Chunyang Dao sect were both here for their disciples, and the first step for them to choose their disciples was to look at their potential. If their potential and talent were up to standard, then they could check if their temperament was up to standard. Therefore, it was inevitable that both sides would have their eyes on the same disciple at the same time. Naturally, it was easy for conflicts to arise. If Chu Xiu still did not think of a way to break the balance between the three sects, just the battle with the Buddhist and Daoist sects here would exhaust a lot of his energy. Yi Shao was not stupid. Chu Xiu's plan was not complicated, so he guessed it immediately. He immediately said, Sir, what you mean is that you want to use me as a key point to trigger a battle between the Buddhist and Daoist sects, so that both sides will suffer? Chu Xiu nodded and said, That's what I mean. However, it sounds simple, but it's very difficult to do. First of all, you must receive enough attention from the pure Yang Daoist sect. Then, after you kill the people from the Great Light Temple, the pure Yang Daoist sect will protect you to the death, and even fight with the Great Light Temple for you. You know very well what this means. The Chunyang Dao sect came to the Northern Yan to preach, to recruit disciples, and to make up for the current situation of the Chunyang Dao sect's lack of talent. Therefore, the value you need to display is that you alone are comparable to all the young disciples in the land of Northern Yan. Only by doing so will you be able to make the Chunyang Daoist sect disregard everything to protect you and fight to the death against the Temple of Great Light. Also, you have to completely anger the martial arts practitioners of the Great Light Temple, so that they will kill you as soon as possible. In short, this task is very difficult, and also very dangerous. If your identity is known to the Chunyang Dao sect, the Chunyang Dao sect will definitely be furious. They will not care about my face, and you will almost certainly die. And when you attack the Great Light Temple, if you are not careful, you will easily die in the hands of the Great Light Temple monks. This dangerous task is not something that can be forced, so I will give you a chance to choose. After the task is done, I will give you 3 positions. One of the dragon heads of the Blue Dragon Society. Of course, with your strength, you can only be ranked last. The torture officer of the Guangzhong torture room. After you take over, you will have the greatest power. The chief deacon of the Jianghu Hall, your position is equivalent to Tangya, Yan Bugui, Peng Hu, and the others. Life or power, it's your choice. Chapter 942. Chu Xiu was not a man who liked to talk about principles. The reason why his men followed him was very simple. It was not for some illusory hope, ideals, or bullsh*t. It was very simple. If you follow me, you will have meat to eat. As long as you followed Chu Xiu, these things were at your fingertips. So until now, there had not been any rebellions or dissatisfaction among Chu Xiu's men. As long as you had the strength and dared to fight, Chu Xiu could give you whatever you wanted. Why would you be dissatisfied? As for those who did not dare to fight, but complained that they followed Chu Xiu and did not get any benefits, such people were no different from trash. Naturally, they would be eliminated. Even if such trash really rebelled, they would still be trash and would not be able to cause any trouble. The mission this time was indeed dangerous. Even when Chu Xiu was young, he had to plan for a long period of time and only do it after he was 80% confident. Now, he asked Yi Xiao to do it because he was indeed the most suitable one. Almost all the young martial artists under Chu Xiu were famous in Jianghu. Even people like Tang Ye and Yan Bugui were very famous in the northern Yan land. And those who knew Yi Xiao's identity had almost all been killed. The Yi family was gone, and so were the Sun family and the Lu family. Who knew Yi Xiao's real identity? When the Blue Dragon Society assassins carried out a mission, they all wore masks. Yi Xiao's identity was very well hidden. He was now a blank piece of paper. Chu Xiu could write anything he wanted. Facing Chu Xiu's gaze, Yi Xiao did not even think and said directly, "I am willing to accept this mission." Fortune came from risk. There was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. Moreover, it was not easy for him to carry out missions in the Blue Dragon Society in the past. It was still full of danger. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "That's good. However, your current strength is still not enough for Chunyang Dao's sect to value you. I still have to teach you some things." Currently, Yi Xiao was full of killing techniques. With his strength and talent, he was already qualified to join the Chunyang Dao sect. However, it was obvious that he was still far from being valued by the Chunyang Dao sect. Right now, Yi Xiao had quite a few demonic path martial arts on him. He had the great demonic blood technique and the blood transformation divine saber that Chu Xiu had given him, as well as some of the techniques that he had learned from the Blue Dragon Society. In any case, none of them were good. Therefore, Chu Xiu had to modify Yi Xiao's cultivation method. In fact, Yi Xiao still had some connections with Taoism. In the beginning, because his talent was not so outstanding, the cultivation method that Chu Xiu gave him was the Xiantian skill. Although the Xiantian skill did not add much to combat power, it could sort out the meridians of a martial artist, wash his marrow, and change his talent. The foundation of Yi Xiao's martial arts was itself the foundation of Taoism, including Chu Xiu. However, this was not enough. Chu Xiu had to let him have a deeper understanding of the Taoism connotation. Therefore, Chu Xiu was ready to teach him the heavens sun gazing at air technique. However, something like the heavens sun gazing at air technique could not be learned in a short period of time. Even Chu Xiu at that time had only learned it when he was in a life and death crisis. However, it did not matter. Chu Xiu did not expect Yi Xiao to learn the heavens sun gazing at air technique in such a short period of time. He only needed Yi Xiao to comprehend a part of the Taoism power brought by the heavens sun gazing at air technique. Simply put, he wanted Yi Xiao to look like a natural Daoist. Concentrate, close your eyes, and empty your mind. You don't need to remember the detailed explanation of the heavens sun gazing at air technique. You only need to remember this feeling. As for the cultivation method, if there is an opportunity in the future, you will naturally comprehend it. Yi Xiao nodded and began to concentrate and close his eyes according to Chu Xiu's instructions. The next moment, an extremely mysterious aura had already wrapped around him. In an instant, he seemed to be in the most origin of this space. Heaven and earth, yin and yang, and even the power of heaven and earth, such as wind, cloud, thunder, and lightning, were dancing around him. Yi Xiao had not yet reached the realm of oneness of heaven and man, so his understanding of the power of heaven and earth was almost zero. At this time, what he felt was the most basic Tao in this world. The nature of heaven and earth was the Tao. He could not understand these things, but they were violently poured into his mind by Chu Xiu. After 3 days and 3 nights, when Yi Xiao completely walked out of this state, he felt dizzy. However, his eyes were shining, and there were even the sun, moon, and stars rotating in them. However, in Chu Xiu's eyes, at this time, Yi Xiao's whole body was shining with a faint aura of Dao connotation. It was very thick, so thick that it was somewhat fake. However, it did not matter. After 2 days, when Yi Xiao got used to it, he would appear much more natural. By then, in the eyes of outsiders, Yi Xiao would definitely be a cultivation genius. However, this was not enough. What Chu Xiu wanted to give to the Chunyang Dao sect was not only a cultivation genius, but also a genius who was the most suitable for the Chunyang Dao sect. What kind of person was suitable for the Chunyang Dao sect? Of course, it was someone like Shi Yunzi, who was born with a pure Yang Dao body and could perfectly control the pure Yang divine weapon. Chu Xiu was unable to disguise his pure Yang Dao body, but he was still able to augment Yi Xiao with a portion of his pure Yang power. The Mahavarokana Dharma formed by the sun-changing technique was the purest pure Yang power. It should be said that it was in existence with the pure Yang power of the Chunyang Dao sect. The difference was that one was supported by the power of Dao connotation, while the other was supported by the light of Buddha. Chu Xiu only needed to purify the power of Mahavarokana with the power of Taoism and pour it into Yi Xiao's body, so that he would have a natural affinity with the pure Yang power. After a few days, Yi Xiao's Gang Qi had changed. It became a kind of Gang Qi that was inclined to the attribute of Taoism, with a slight amount of pure Yang power. Seeing Yi Xiao in this state, Chu Xiu nodded and threw a few sword techniques to Yi Xiao. He said, "The Chunyang Dao sect uses swords. Don't use saber techniques for the time being. The identity I found for you is a Northern Yen individual cultivator. You have a fiery temper and hate evil. These sword techniques are some basic sword techniques, which are just right for your identity. The Jinwu Hall will try their best to cooperate with you in the next action, but after you enter the Chunyang Dao sect, you will have to rely on yourself." Yi Xiao nodded as if he was holding his future in his hands as he held those sword techniques in his hands. Shanyang Prefecture in the Northern Yen Forest Prefecture. Chu Xiu was very familiar with this place because it was the first place he stayed after he left Wei County and came to the Northern Yen. Today was the ceremony for the disciples of the Fang family of Shanyang Prefecture to enter the Chunyang Dao sect. It was very grand. Even Shi Yunzi and Meiko Mori, who were in charge of the Chunyang Dao sect's Northern Yen branch, would be there. The master of the Fang family had specially invited all the forces in the Shanyang Prefecture. It was obvious that he was showing off. Shi Yunzi and Meiko Mori sat in the main hall of the Fang family, looking impatient. Originally, it would not be so troublesome to accept a disciple, but this disciple of the Fang family was really talented. Most importantly, he had a strong affinity with the pure Yang Gang Qi. It could even be said that he was born to cultivate the pure Yang Gang Qi. This disciple of the Fang family could be said to be the most surprising one among all the disciples that the Chunyang Dao sect had accepted since they came to the Northern Yen. Therefore, even though they knew that the master of the Fang family was actually using the power of the Chunyang Dao sect to show off, they had no choice but to agree to it. It could be considered as giving him face. After all, his son was going to cultivate in the Chunyang Dao sect from now on. Even though he was their junior, they still had to take care of his feelings. Anyway, this was just a one-time thing. A disciple with such talent would definitely not stay in the Northern Yen. He would definitely be sent back to the mountain gate of the Chunyang Dao sect in the Eastern Qi to cultivate. He might not be able to leave the mountain for the next 10 years. The master of the Fang family greeted the guests and introduced them to everyone who came. As he listened to the compliments of the others, he grinned so widely that it almost reached his ears. The heavens had blessed the Fang family. They had given birth to such a talented son who was valued by the Chunyang Dao sect. From now on, the Fang family would soar to the top. However, at this moment, a commotion suddenly came from outside. There was even the sound of weapons clashing. This caused the master of the Fang family to instantly change his expression. Today was a big day for the Fang family. Who would dare to cause trouble here? Before the master of the Fong family could send someone to investigate, two people who were fighting went straight into the main hall. Of course, to be precise, this was not a fight, but a chase. The person being chased was covered in blood. He was a ferocious-looking one-eyed brawny man who was holding a saber that was as tall as a person. The person who was chasing him was Yi Xiao. However, the current Yi Xiao was completely different from the black-clothed cold-blooded killer he was in the Blue Dragon Society. He was wearing a green warrior suit with some patches on it. In his hand was an ordinary Damascus iron sword. With a righteous expression on his face, he shouted angrily, "Chen Wujiao. Let's see where you can run now. Your serpent dragon village has killed countless people and is full of evil. Today, I will kill you for the sake of the people." When the others heard Chen Wujiao's name, they were all shocked. Why would this ruthless bandit come here? Chen Wujiao was a very famous bandit on the trade route from Linzhong Commandery to Wei Commandery. He had the strength of the Three-Flower Realm. This kind of strength was already considered very shocking among the bandits. The Serpent Dragon village under his command had 300 cavalrymen. They came and went like the wind, and all the merchants that traveled between Wei Commandery and Northern Yen had been robbed by him. Moreover, the other bandits still followed some rules. They usually only took goods and did not take lives. However, this Chen Wujiao was cruel and merciless. After taking goods, sometimes he would still take lives. From the current situation, it seemed that this young hero could not stand Chen Wujiao's character. That was why he attacked the Serpent Dragon village and chased him to this point. However, everyone was confused. If Chen Wujiao wanted to escape, he could have escaped to Shangmang Mountain, which was on the border of Northern Yen and Wei Commandery. Why did he escape to the Fong family? Chapter 943. Yi Zhao's appearance was meticulously planned by Chu Xiu. He was a righteous young man. Although he was an itinerant cultivator, he abhorred evil and challenged a bandit village alone. This achievement was enough to attract people's attention. Moreover, Chu Xiu had even prepared Yi Zhao's identity. At this moment, the people in the hall were still confused about Yi Zhao's identity. Someone asked the anemophilia in the crowd, "Who is this young man? Since when did our Linzhong Commandery have such a talented person?" Yi Zhao's identity was also changed by Wind-Sweeping Tower. In fact, it was not changed much. All Chu Xiu wanted was the identity of a young itinerant cultivator. With a word from Qi Yuanli, Wind-Sweeping Tower updated all the information about the anemophilia in Northern Yen with this person's name. Yi Xiao was still called Yi Xiao, but his identity was completely different. The anemophilia waved his fan and said, "This young man is not from Linzhong Commandery. He is an itinerant cultivator from Yuyang in Western Yen. His name is Yi Xiao. He was taught by some Jianghu wanderers when he was young, so he is motivated to travel the Jianghu and punish evil. He has only recently made a name for himself." Everyone in the hall nodded. He was just an itinerant cultivator. No matter how young he was, it was not worth paying attention to. However, at this moment, no one noticed that Meiko Mori and Shi Yunzi were staring at Yi Xiao. Shi Yunzi said in a daze, "Uncle Master, did you see that?" Meiko Mori also said in a daze, "Of course I saw it. His Taoist connotation is formed by nature. This young man is qualified to join our Dao sect." At this moment, the long sword in Yi Zhao's hand rippled with a sword light. It was just an ordinary sword light, but Shi Yunzi and Meiko Mori could feel that Yi Zhao's true qi contained a trace of extreme yang power. It was not because he had cultivated this kind of cultivation method, but because he was born with this kind of power. Shi Yunzi and Meiko Mori looked at each other, and even their breathing quickened. A genius. This young man was the most suitable genius for the Chunyang Dao sect. Although it was not comparable to Shi Yunzi's pure young Daoist physique, the attribute of the inner force that Yi Xiao displayed was definitely innately compatible with the pure yang power of the pure yang Daoist sect. Once he cultivated the pure yang Daoist sect's cultivation method, his cultivation would definitely improve by leaps and bounds. Both of them were filled with boundless joy and surprise. Compared to Yi Xiao, the disciples of the Fang clan and Yuanzi. Previously, when they came here to support the Fang clan, they were somewhat unwilling. They did not expect that there would be an unexpected surprise this time. Shi Yunzi said in a low voice, "I heard from the Jianghu people that this kid is an itinerant cultivator. Yunzi Chen. And Yunzi Tian. And King. Yunzi, and Yunzi Yan Qi. Yunzi Dao cultivator who is Chen, the cultivation method is Qing Yun. During this period of time, only 10% of the disciples recruited by the pure Yang Dao sect in northern Yen were rogue cultivators. Most of them were disciples nurtured by small aristocratic families like the Fang family. One had to admit that things like inheritance were very important. If both parents were martial artists, then the martial arts talent of the offspring would also increase. Moreover, they had a good foundation from the moment they were born. Regardless of whether this foundation was good or bad, it could at least stimulate a martial artist's potential. On the contrary, some ordinary civilians, even if they had martial arts talent, they might not be able to come into contact with martial arts in their lifetime. Moreover, because he did not have a good foundation when he was young, it caused his meridians to gradually close up. No matter how good his talent was, it would only be a waste in the end. However, for the Chunyang Dao sect, they were still more willing to accept those unaffiliated martial artists with no background into the sect because it was simple and convenient. These small forces were not very powerful, but they were too good at stirring up trouble. Last time, the conflict between them and Chu Xiao was caused by these small forces. It was easier to control the disciples who were clean. Mako Mori nodded and said, "Let's wait and see. This kid seems to have a good reputation, but we still have to pay attention to his temperament." At this time, Chen Wujiao had already been seriously injured by Yi Xiao's pursuit, and Yi Xiao had even held back. With the killing methods that Yi Xiao had trained in the Blue Dragon Society, if he really wanted to kill Chen Wujiao, 3 moves would be enough. Fang family head. Save me. Chen Wujiao suddenly shouted at the Fang family head. The Fang family head's expression changed slightly, and his expression was uncertain. He suddenly took action and captured Chen Wujiao. He said to Yi Xiao, "Young hero Yi, right? This person is a bandit from Shangmang Mountain. He has robbed many caravans, and the Fang family has a grudge against him. There is no need to trouble young hero Yi to kill him. When there is time, I will gather the friends and relatives of those who have been harmed by this villain, and we will hold a public trial to execute him." Yi Xiao laughed coldly and said, "Do you think I'm an idiot?" Chen Wujiao said before that the Serpent Dragon village under his command was built together with you. All these years, the Fang family has been secretly helping the Serpent Dragon village. All the forces that have a grudge against the Fang family or have any competition with the Fang family have been massacred by this villain. As soon as he said this, everyone's expression changed. They looked at the Fang family head with a strange expression. This Chen Wujiao didn't kill every single one of his targets, but those who were killed by him seemed to be the Fang family's competitors. If the Fang family really did such a thing, it would be equivalent to destroying the entire Mountain Sun Prefecture. The Fang family head snorted coldly and said, "Nonsense. How could the Fang family do such a thing?" Yi Xiao laughed coldly and said, "If the Fang family has nothing to do with Chen Wujiao, why didn't he escape into Shangmang Mountain when I was chasing him? Why did he have to escape to the Mountain Sun Prefecture, to your Fang family? If the Fang family has nothing to do with Chen Wujiao, why did he call for help just now?" While the Fang family head was still thinking of an excuse, Yi Xiao had already rushed forward. The Fang family head's expression changed. He immediately ordered a group of people to stop Yi Xiao. However, at this moment, Yi Xiao seemed to have gone mad. Dozens of people couldn't stop him, so he rushed out of the crowd and killed Chen Wujiao. The Fang family head was so angry that his entire body was trembling. However, Yi Xiao still carried Chen Wujiao's head and swaggered out. The other martial artists who came to watch the ceremony looked at the Fang family head with different expressions. It was easy to tell whether the young man's words were true or not. Although they didn't completely fall out today, the Fang family's days in the Mountain Sun Prefecture were probably not going to be easy. Xianxia and Mako Mori looked at each other and immediately followed. The Fang family head watched as the people of the Chunyang Dao sect left. He wanted to stop them, but Xianxia and Mako Mori didn't even look at him. Outside the Fang family head, Mako Mori called out to Yi Xiao, "Little brother, please wait a moment." Yi Xiao turned around and asked expressionlessly, "What is it?" Mako Mori smiled and said, "Do you know who we are?" Yi Xiao nodded and said, "I do. We are the enlightened master of the Chunyang Dao sect, one of the 3 major Daoist sections." The Fang family had already started to spread the news a few days ago. Not only the Mountain Sun Prefecture knows about it, but the entire Linzhong Commandery also knows about it. Mako Mori continued to smile kindly and said, "Little brother, I see that you are very talented, so I want to take you into the Chunyang Dao sect. What do you think?" Yi Xiao shook his head and said, "Nothing much." Mako Mori and Xianxia were stunned. During this period of time, they had been recruiting disciples in the northern Yan land. Whether they were rogue cultivators or those from small forces, they were all excited when they heard that they could be accepted into the Chunyang Dao sect. But now, this kid actually rejected it. Did he know what he was rejecting? Why? Do you know what it means to join the Chunyang Dao sect? Mako Mori asked curiously. Yi Xiao said lightly, "Of course I know what it means to join the Chunyang Dao sect. It means that I will stand out and have a meteoric rise. However, when I was learning martial arts in the past, my master once taught me that as a martial artist, it is very unjust to slay the world with a sword. We must live up to our conscience and the sword in our hands." Today, the Fang family's patriarch had colluded with Chen Wujiao and cruelly harmed passing merchants. He could simply be said to be wicked beyond redemption and despicable to the extreme. I can only kill Chen Wujiao alone, but I can't destroy the Fang family. However, the Chunyang Dao sect can manage these things. In the end, not only do you not care, but you are also with the Fang family, supporting the Fang family. The so-called righteous sects are still like flies for personal gain, and they are in cahoots with the Fang family. No matter how strong they are, no matter how powerful they are, I will not join such a sect. I, Yi, am not worthy of such a high position. Apart from Xianxia and Mako Mori, there were a few other Chunyang Dao sect martial artists present. Hearing him insult the Chunyang Dao sect, the other Chunyang Dao sect martial artists were immediately enraged. They wanted to cause trouble for Yi Xiao. However, Mako Mori held them back. There was no anger on his face. Instead, there was a satisfied look on his face. This young man has a pure heart. Although he has a fiery temper and doesn't know how to be flexible, he is righteous and hates evil. He is a rare good seedling. He said in a deep voice, "Your master is a true chivalrous man. I wonder where he is now." Yi Xiao was silent for a moment, then said, "Master is dead. He is just an ordinary wandering cultivator. His strength is not as strong as I am now." When he was helping a wandering cultivator to uphold justice, he was besieged and killed by a sect. Right now, his master was Chu Xiu in name. However, it was Chu Xiu who asked him to say this. He couldn't be blamed for being disrespectful to Chu Xiu. Mako Mori said, "You said that we are in cahoots with the Fang family. You are wrong about that. The Chunyang Dao sect only accepted a disciple from the Fang family. If the Fang family uses the reputation of the Chunyang Dao sect to do evil, the Chunyang Dao sect will be the first to not spare them. However, the matter between the Fang family and Chen Wujiao is indeed the fault of the Chunyang Dao sect. Therefore, this time, the Chunyang Dao sect will investigate the Fang family strictly even if we don't want the disciple from the Fang family. It is good that you are chivalrous, but you have to know that there are too many injustices in this world. Without strength, you can't eradicate them. Your master died because he was alone and was surrounded and attacked by others. If you join the Chunyang Dao sect, the entire Chunyang Dao sect will support you. Young man, you won't regret joining the Chunyang Dao sect. Even if you really regret it, I will give you a promise. I can let you go at any time. Chapter 944. Sometimes, people were so cheap that they wouldn't cherish what was easily obtained. Those that were rejected but welcomed, and those that were not easily obtained would seem precious instead. When those young martial artists heard that Chunyang Dao's sect wanted to recruit them, they were all excited, but Mako Mori and Shiyunzi didn't feel anything. But Yi Xiao rejected them without hesitation, and he even said that Chunyang Dao's sect was fishing for fame, which aroused their interest instead. Yi Xiao hesitated a little. Is what you said true? Mako Mori said with a smile, of course it's true, don't be blinded by ignorance. My Chunyang Dao sect is also a major righteous sect. Today's matter was just a moment of carelessness. You can ask around in the martial world. My Chunyang Dao sect may not have a good reputation in the martial world, but have you seen anyone say that my Chunyang Dao sect colluded with the evil people? Shi Yunzi on the side said, and your talent is very suitable to cultivate the martial arts of Chunyang Dao sect. Although you are motivated to eradicate many injustices in this world, this also requires strength. Today you can't even take down the Fong family. What can you do when you encounter evil people who are stronger than you in the future? If you join my Chunyang Dao sect, your future achievements will not be as simple as the martial arts Grand Master of the real Pellet State. The two took turns to explain and persuade him, and even offered countless conditions to entice him. The other disciples of Chunyang Dao's sect were a little jealous. When they joined Chunyang Dao's sect was actually still at its peak, and it wasn't like now. Therefore, at that time, Chunyang Dao's sect was very strict in accepting disciples. They were all elites who had been eliminated several times. As a result, this kid was recruited by Shi Yunzi and Mako Mori in turn as if it was a sin not to accept him into Chunyang Dao's sect. It was simply unreasonable. Under the premise that the two of them were so sincere, Yi Xiao reluctantly agreed to join Chunyang Dao's sect. Seeing that Yi Xiao finally agreed, Mako Mori said with a serious expression, since little brother has now joined my Chunyang Dao's sect, you are no longer a casual martial artist from now on. You need to know the rules of a big sect. Joining the sect will teach you martial arts and provide protection. In the future, you will also have to fight for the interests of the sect. From now on, you are no longer alone. Your every move represents Chunyang Dao's sect. Chunyang Dao's sect is your backing, but at the same, you can't lose the face of Chunyang Dao's sect. Yi Xiao nodded with a solemn expression. I know this. Master taught me before. Heaven and earth do not need to bow to the ruler, and the ruler does not need to kneel to the ruler. Only one's parents and the grace of teaching can never be forgotten. Mako Mori and Shi Yunzi looked at each other and nodded with satisfaction. This kid was a good seedling, and he would definitely be one of the pillars of Chunyang Dao's sect in the future. Although it was still a little early to say, looking at his temperament and potential, he would not be too bad in the future. Originally, when Chunyang Dao's sect came to northern Yan, even Ling Yunzi came with the intention of giving it a try. He did not expect to get such an unexpected reward. It was worth it. Therefore, Yi Xiao was successfully brought to the Chunyang Dao sect's branch. Originally, with Yi Xiao's talent, he would definitely be sent to the mountain gate of Eastern Qi's Chunyang Dao's sect to cultivate. However, Chunyang Dao's sect still accepted many disciples here, and they were going to send them over when they had enough people. During his time in the northern Yan branch, because Yi Xiao already had some foundation, Mako Mori taught Chunyang Dao's sect's pure Yang Dao scripture to Yi Xiao. Because of the purified Mahavarokana's power, Yi Xiao's inner force attribute had changed a little on the basis of the source. Cultivating the pure Yang Dao scripture again was like a fish in water, and it was not an exaggeration to say that he made tremendous progress. Moreover, when he cultivated, he was so crazy that even Shi Yunzi and Mako Mori were shocked. Nowadays, it was rare to see a young man who cultivated so hard. In fact, Yi Xiao was showing his true colors. When he was in Blue Dragon Society, he was already so crazy and hard-working in his cultivation. Shi Yunzi shook his head and said, no wonder this kid has such a cultivation level even though he's a lone cultivator. God knows how he's been living all these years. He's a martial arts madman. Shou Zhenzi took a look at him and said, I've heard from Ling Yunzi that when you first joined the Pure Yang Dao sect, you spent more time on playing than cultivating. If you could cultivate as hard as Yi Xiao, with your Pure Yang Dao body's talent, you wouldn't be at your current cultivation level. Shi Yunzi smiled awkwardly and said, life is short. If I don't enjoy myself, when I'm about to die in the future, I'll look back on how boring my life has been. Wouldn't I regret it to death? I'll teach this kid a good lesson someday. When it comes to cultivation, it's enough. Why does he have to work so hard? Shou Zhenzi glared at him. Don't instill your messy theories into him. The path of martial arts is like a boundless sea of bitterness. If you stop a step, you will fall behind by a bit. Mako Mori was very satisfied with Yi Xiao. Such a good seedling was worth cultivating. However, he didn't know that Yi Xiao was extremely anxious at the moment. It was because he realized that he seemed to be trapped in Chunyang Dao sect. The plan that official Chu gave him was to stir up a conflict between Taoism and Buddhism. In the end, he was ordered by Mako Mori to stay in Chunyang Dao sect to cultivate. Although Chunyang Dao sect was very generous to him and there were all kinds of cultivation resources, what about his mission? After thinking about it, Yi Xiao took the initiative to look for Mako Mori and said, Patriarch, I see that the other senior brothers are walking outside. I've been in Chunyang Dao sect for so long, but I've been cultivating with cultivation resources. I haven't made any contributions. I want to go out and help the sect find suitable disciples. Mako Mori waved his hand and said, you don't have to do these things. How long have you been in the sect? You don't even have a Daoist name. What's the rush? Remember, everyone has their own responsibilities, including the sect leader. Although you're cultivating with a lot of resources now and don't have to do anything, when the sect needs you in the future, you'll have to put in more effort. Mako Mori was doing this for Yi Xiao's sake. It would be a waste if a talented disciple like him was sent to do those complicated things and neglected his cultivation. At this moment, Shi Yunzi said, I think this kid can't hold it in anymore. Just let him go out. Don't forget, this kid has always been a rogue cultivator. He's been fighting in the Jianghu all day. If you suddenly ask him to stay here and cultivate all day, I don't think he'll be able to hold it in. Cultivation has to be done step by step. If he forcefully holds it in, it might affect his cultivation speed. Hearing Shi Yunzi's words, Mako Mori felt that it made sense. He nodded and called for a Daoist in his 30s. He said in a deep voice, Xian Yi, I'll leave Yi Xiao to you. Take him with you during this time. Remember, be careful. Yi Xiao's name was very famous in the entire Chunyang Dao sect. Daoist Xian Yi also knew that he was the only disciple that Shi Yunzi and Mako Mori had personally asked to join the Chunyang Dao sect. So he quickly said, don't worry, Grand Uncle. I'll be careful. After Xian Yi brought Yi Xiao out, Yi Xiao asked, Senior Martial Brother Xian Yi, do we usually go around the whole northern Yen looking for disciples? Daoist Xian Yi hesitated and said, Senior Martial Brother? Forget it. You haven't officially ranked in terms of seniority yet. Just call me Senior Martial Brother for now. Within the Chunyang Dao sect, there was also a seniority system. When Yi Xiao entered the sect, he might be 2 generations younger than Xian Yi and have to call him Grand Uncle. Of course, it was also possible that Ling Yunzi would accept him as a disciple. In that case, he would become Xian Yi's Grand Uncle. Daoist Xian Yi said in a deep voice, of course we won't go around randomly. The northern Yen region is so big, and the sects have already been divided. Who will go to which county to search for suitable disciples, in addition to the rogue cultivators? Some people are willing to send their disciples to the Chunyang Dao sect, but some of the leaders of the forces are not willing to send their disciples to Eastern Qi. They would rather cultivate their own disciples. In this case, we can only persuade them with kind words. If we can't persuade them, then there's nothing we can do. But we have to be careful of the others. A strange look appeared in Yi Xiao's eyes. He asked, be careful of who? Daoist Xian Yi said coldly, of course be careful of the monks from the Great Light Temple. They always like to snatch people from us. The monks from the Great Light Temple have even brought the entire Vajrayard. We are indeed behind them in terms of numbers. Moreover, the Great Light Temple is in the north, near the northern Yan region. In terms of reputation, they are indeed more famous than the Chunyang Dao sect. They are more trusted by the other forces. But they don't think about it. Sending their disciples to the Great Light Temple to be monks is equivalent to ending their lineage. How could they bear to do that? Just like the Chunyang Dao sect, it doesn't matter if we marry or have children. Isn't that great? A strange look appeared in Yi Zhao's eyes. Senior martial brother, you've already married and had children? Daoist Xianxia said awkwardly, I haven't. But for an outstanding Taoist hero like me, I don't have to worry about finding a wife. It's just that I don't care about what's going on outside and only focus on cultivating the Tao scripture. My thoughts are all on cultivation. Naturally, I don't care about women. It's okay. I'm still young. It won't be too late to get married after I've achieved something in my cultivation. Yi Xiao took a look at Daoist Xianxia. He was indeed not old. He was only in his 30s. However, he had a square face, a bulbous nose, a wide forehead, and a big mouth. How could he have the cheek to say that he was outstanding? Initially, Yi Xiao thought that the Chunyang Dao sect was made up of stubborn old Daoist priests. Now, it seemed that the younger generation of martial artists was quite interesting. However, enemies were enemies. No matter how interesting they were, they still had to be tricked. Chapter 945. Daoist Xianxia knew that Yi Zhao's identity was sensitive, so he deliberately did not bring him to places where there was a conflict with the Great Light Temple. Under normal circumstances, as the Great Light Temple was close to the extreme north, they were also active in the northern Yan, while the Chunyang Dao sect was active in South and West Yan. West Yan was the territory of the Huangfu clan. When Daoist Xianxia brought Yi Xiao and a few disciples of the Chunyang Dao sect to West Yan, he also visited the people of the Huangfu clan. The people of the Huangfu clan were very polite. They did not seem to care that the Chunyang Dao sect was recruiting disciples in West Yan. The Huangfu clan was an aristocratic family, not a sect. Even if the Chunyang Dao sect emptied the entire West Yan, they would not care. As Daoist Xianxia brought Yi Xiao and the others to a small aristocratic family in West Yan, he said, when we arrive at the Lin clan, remember not to be too polite. Just put on an attitude that the Chunyang Dao sect is giving you face by accepting your clan's disciples. Otherwise, these small aristocratic families will take advantage of us and make all sorts of requests. I've already made a trip to the Lin clan. The clan leader of the Lin clan even said that his son is his only son and that he needs to think about it. Pfft. Don't think I don't know that he has a few sons. Seeing that the Chunyang Dao sect has not contacted him for so long, he has taken the initiative to contact us. So, after we enter, there's no need to be polite to them. Just bring your people and leave. The other Daoist priests of the Chunyang Dao sect nodded. Their senior brother was experienced. If he said what to do, then they would do it. However, when they arrived at the Lin family patriarch did not show himself. Instead, he sent his own younger brother to receive Yi Xiao and the others. Moreover, his attitude was hesitant, as if he was deliberately delaying something. Daoist Xianxia felt that something was wrong. He pushed the other party away and snorted. What is the Lin clan doing? You called us here, but you didn't bring our people out. Are you trying to fool the Chunyang Dao sect? The Lin family warrior hurriedly said, I wouldn't dare, of course I wouldn't dare. Although he said that he didn't dare, he still didn't bring the person over. Daoist Xianxia felt that something was wrong. Suddenly, he sensed a strange aura. He directly pushed the Lin family's warrior away and walked straight to another reception room. Pushing open the door and entering, it turned out to be the head of the Lin family and a few monks from the Great Guangming Temple. Daoist Xianxia's face darkened. Lin family head, what do you mean by this? The head of the Lin clan smiled awkwardly and said, Sir, please don't blame me. I suddenly realized that my son is more suitable to be a disciple of the Temple of Great Light. Therefore, I'm afraid the agreement I made with you will have to be nullified. Daoist Xianxia said coldly, didn't you say that your Lin family only has one son? Why, you're willing to send him to the Temple of Great Light to become a monk? Aren't you afraid that your Lin family will have no more descendants? The head of the Lin family wiped the cold sweat off his forehead as he anxiously thought about what excuse he should give. However, before he could come up with an excuse, Daoist Xianxia shouted, what does the Lin family think our Chunyang Dao sect is? You called us here, but in the end, you want our disciple to be a disciple of someone else. Are you trying to make a fool out of our Chunyang Dao sect? The head of the Lin family trembled in fear. At that moment, from the Temple of Great Light side, a young monk in his 30s stood up and said with a smile, almsgivers of the Chunyang Dao sect, please don't be anxious. Taking in a disciple is also a matter of fate. This disciple from the Lin family should be fated with our Temple of Great Light. That's why he's joining us at this time. The monk in white had a good appearance. At least, he was much better than the square-faced Daoist Xianxia. However, although his tone was gentle, his attitude was extremely tough. If the disciple from the Lin family is fated with the Temple of Great Light, then he's not fated with the Chunyang Dao sect. Therefore, if they want this disciple, the Chunyang Dao sect can go wherever it wants to go. Daoist Xianxia said coldly, big monk, you've crossed the line. This is the land of West Yen. What do you mean by coming here to take in a disciple? The monk in white shook his head and said, what a joke. Who set the line? Why can't I come? Daoist Xianxia was speechless. This was an unspoken rule. Who would set the rule? He said with a gloomy expression, so you're saying that you're determined to take him away today? The monk in white from the Temple of Great Light said calmly, why can't I take the disciple from the Temple of Great Light? The long sword in Daoist Xianxia's hands suddenly burned with scorching pure yang qi. He stabbed the sword at the monk in white and said coldly, today, I'd like to see who can leave this place. The disciple that my Chunyang Dao sect can't take away, your Temple of Great Light can't either. During this period of time, the conflict between Taoism and Buddhism was not the first or second time. Shi Yunzi and Meiko Mori had already told them that when facing the martial artists from the Temple of Great Light, although they did not have to fight to the death, they did not have to give in either. Victory or defeat would be determined by one's fists. Daoist Xianxia might look ugly, but he was a genuine unity of heaven and man realm martial artist. Although the monk in front of him looked young, he was actually a martial artist from the Temple of Great Light with the name Ming. The young monk who was protected in the middle of the crowd was only in the physical invulnerability realm. Seeing that Yi Zhao's sword was about to slash at him, he was not afraid in the face of danger and did not panic. All the qi, blood, and gang qi in his body surged into his arms. When Yi Zhao's sword was about to pierce him, he used his hands to forcefully clamp Yi Zhao's sword. Although his hands were twisted by the pure yang qi to the point that his bones were exposed, he still managed to clamp Yi Zhao's sword. Senior! Attack! The monk shouted at the others. He wanted to take advantage of the opportunity when Yi Zhao's weapon was in his hands to kill Yi Zhao. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt a chill in his chest. He did not know when, but a scabbard shining with pure yang qi had already pierced through his chest. Blood splattered everywhere. Yi Zhao's eyes were emotionless. The only thing that could kill was a weapon. Junior brother Yan Guang. A few martial artists from the Temple of Great Light were furious. They knew how important this junior brother Yan Guang was to the Temple of Great Light. This person was a genius that Su Yan Guang found in the south of Yen. He was born to cultivate the furious Vajra Heart Sutra of the Temple of Great Light. His mind was extremely calm, so calm that he would not be affected by the side effects of the furious Vajra Heart Sutra. Originally, the disciples that the Temple of Great Light recruited would be sent to the temples in the north to shave their tongues. However, because of Yan Guang's talent, they were afraid that some accident would happen along the way, so they shaved Yan Guang alone, resulting in this matter. However, Who would have thought that they would lose the disciple that they valued the most in the Temple of Great Light when they wanted to take in another disciple along the way? The monk in white, who was fighting fiercely outside, also noticed this and instantly began to attack Daoist Xian Yi in a frenzy. Seeing that the group of monks from the Temple of Great Light seemed to have gone crazy, Daoist Xian Yi could no longer care about snatching disciples. He hurriedly brought Yi Shao and the others away as he fought. In the Lin family, the monks from the Temple of Great Light looked at Yan Guang's corpse on the ground. They all frowned and their anger surged. The monk in white who looked elegant earlier also shouted furiously, "Chunyang Dao sect. This matter is definitely not over." The master of the Lin family could not be bothered to consider whether to send his disciple to the Temple of Great Light or to the Chunyang Dao sect. He only knew one thing. This matter seemed to have blown up. You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.